All right, we are now live streaming. And we are recording. Mr. Mayor, you may start the meeting.
Very good. Thank you, everyone, for being here. This is the City of St. Helena regular City Council meeting, Tuesday, April 13th, 2021. I am Mayor Jeff Ellsworth here with the St. Helena City Council, and Cindy is going to help us understand the remote access and the Spanish language interpretation that we do.
I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. All right, for public participation, when public comment is called, for folks to participate, they would dial into the meeting, which is 669-900-6833. At the prompt, you would enter the meeting ID, which is 821-3843-0191, and then you would press pound. And then during public comment, when it is called and you are allowed to speak to address the City Council, you would press *9 to speak with the council. And tonight's meeting will have live Spanish interpretation. To access the interpretation, you will need to use the Zoom application from either your cell phone, tablet, or computer. Instructions on how to use the Zoom app are listed in English and Spanish on the agenda posted on the city's website. Once you join the meeting from the Zoom application, you will see a small globe at the bottom or top of the screen. Click on the globe and you will be able to access the live interpretation. Marcy and Claudia are interpreters this evening. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Very good, thank you. We'll move now to our Pledge of Allegiance. If folks would mute your microphones and place your right hand on your heart and follow with me, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We'll now move on to our adoption of the agenda. Are there any changes? I'll ask the city clerk if there are any changes to tonight's agenda.
Should we go ahead and do roll call first?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes.
Mr. Mayor?
Here.
Vice Mayor Doring?
I'm here.
Councilmember Chateau?
Here.
Hardy?
Here.
And Hall?
Here.
There are a couple changes to the agenda this evening. The first item is item 7.1, presentations. The PG&E gas main project presentation is actually going to be continued to the April 27th meeting. And then also item 9.1 on the consent calendar, it relates to the minutes. And this item will also be continued to the April 27th meeting. Otherwise, the agenda is ready for adoption.
Very good. May we have a motion on the agenda, please?
So moved.
Second.
And a roll call, please.
Councilmember Hardy?
Yes.
Hall?
Yes.
Chateau?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Doring?
Yes.
Mayor Ellsworth?
Yes. Okay, now we'll move to our public forum. This is where members of the public are entitled to speak on matters of municipal concern not on the agenda during public forum. Each person's comments shall be limited to 4 minutes. Each person is entitled to speak on any non-agendized item only once at any meeting. Brief questions by council members for clarifications may be posed and answered, and council members may make requests that items be placed on future agendas. But in accordance with state law, no substantive discussion or action may take place unless and until the matter properly appears on the agenda. Are we seeing any public comment at this point?
Yes, we are, Mayor Ellsworth. Ms. Irvin, I'm going to allow you to speak and you can address the City Council and you will have 4 minutes to speak. You are allowed to speak and unmute yourself.
Hi, thank you. Good evening. I wanted to make a few comments about your workshop planning meeting on April 1st. where a councilman brought up requesting proposals for the Adams Street property that might include hotels. And one of the rationales was that we need to be open-minded and we need to avoid binary thinking. And I'm just wondering, does everybody not remember just 5 years ago, almost to the month, in June on the 21st, the firehouse was packed at a town hall meeting. It was standing room only. And requests for proposals were presented to the community at that time. And those requests covered everything from not only upscale boutique hotels, but there were offers that would have included mixed use office buildings, a 5-star boutique hotel, an event center, retail shops, luxury apartments, even a city hall and police station. I mean, it was all there. It was fantastic. The killing point on those requests was that they all were hotel centric. So it's ludicrous to me that anybody should suggest we need to go through that process again so the St. Helenans can have an idea of what options there are, what kind of variety of things we might be able to draw from. We've been through all that just 5 years ago. We've also voted just 6 months ago to reinforce once again, we don't want a hotel on the Adams Street property. To me, it's beyond the pale. So I submitted some histories for those of you on the city council or even in the community that maybe don't really even know the actual history of the property, the years of meetings and community visioning and this, that, and the other, and never was a hotel considered. In fact, the opposite. It was determined that they did not want it to be a tourist attraction focus on the property. We did not want to go down that road. So we have got some big problems in our community right now, real big. And a hotel on Adams Street would not solve the problems we're looking at. So I really want to encourage the city council not to go down that path just because one of you has said they think it's a good idea. I sure as heck hope you don't go for it because it's going to create an uproar in our community that we don't need right now. We've got to figure out what to do about water and fire prevention and all kinds of other things. So I implore you, get over it, move on, give it the 20 years. And if we haven't figured it all out by then, I think the community might be willing to embrace the idea of a hotel there. Meanwhile, you've got a lot of other options on the table. You initially, well, I'll just stop there, but I submitted the histories and for some reason, when they were posted on your website, they're in really tiny font, so they're difficult to read. So I'll probably maybe resubmit them in a more public manner so they're readable. But anyway,
thank you. Thank you. Is there additional public comment?
There is. Chris Malin, I'm going to allow you to speak. You can unmute yourself and address the City Council.
Good evening, City Council. My name is Chris Malin. I'm the Executive Director of the Institute for Conservation, Advocacy, Research, and Education. And very soon we are taking 2 teams of scientists into the Napa River watershed for the first ever collection of algae samples. And we're going to do comprehensive water quality sampling, and we're doing collecting benthic macroinvertebrates. We're going to be at 33 sites, and we're working with the State Water Board and the AmeriCorps and many community volunteers. I just wanted to let you know we're doing that. But we're very focused on water quality and water availability. And hence, I find the urgency to continue to come to you about the Clover Flat landfill pollution
Miss-
to the Napa River and groundwater.
Malin?
So
Ms. Malin, there's an item on tonight's agenda regarding that. And so I think that would be the appropriate place for those direct comments.
I thought that was for the joint powers agreement, which doesn't address pollution. So I think I should be able to talk about pollution events and the history of pollution by the landfill and all of the egregious violation of their permits and their water quality permits. And it's going to take me several weeks to go through all of this with you because I did a public acts request and I've put it into a ledger and I've documented all the reports and the emails and the conversations about all of the violations of the Clean Water Act and the Port of Cologne Act. And I'm going to start it tonight. If you let me, if you don't, I'll just wait till next week. But it does not relate to the joint powers agreement.
I want to just check with our vice mayor if he's got a take on how this fits in, if you think it relates to the specific issue or is standalone here, or the city attorney.
Well, I respect the mayor, but I do think that the item coming up actually does not have much to do with the conversation that Ms. Malin wants to have right now. That would be my take. That's not my role. I defer to the city attorney on that.
Okay, very good. So I'll look
think,
to the
but I do think Ms. Malin is correct.
I also agree with Ms. Malin. The item that's later on and we should not count this discussion that we're having towards her time. I just wanted to note, but but the issues that she's raising are not what are on our agenda for item 12.2.
Okay. So please continue, Ms. Malin. We'll give you the time back there.
Okay, thank you. And I will wait till you cut me off because I'm just going to keep reading this log that I put together, which starts on March 8th, 2008. It's the waste discharge requirement by the San Francisco Regional Water Quality Control Board. And it was written up for Clover Flat to protect surface water and groundwater. And it details the history, the geology, the actual liners and the unlined part of the landfill, the prohibitions, the reports necessary. It details about protecting water quality. On July 30th, 2014, and again, this is from my PRA request, the solid waste facility permit was issued, and it details programs and prohibitions such as no hazardous waste, no radioactivity, no medical waste or special handling waste or open burning. It increased the tonnage from 300 tons per day to 600 tons per day. And that was July 30th, 2014. On August 7th, 2018, CAL FIRE by Garrett Vinya sent a letter to Clover Flat stating that since 2013, they has responded to 26 incidents, of which 13 were fires, and they were failing to abate fire hazards and ordering them to put in place fire prevention, protection, and control measures. On August 8, 2018, there was a notice of violation issued by the County of Napa for violations and correction actions to their use permit. They failed since 2017 to have fire suppression equipment, and they were using green waste for daily cover, supposed to use 6 to 8 inches of soil each day. And they were ordered to remove 7,500 cubic yards of green and wood waste. On November 30th, 2018, Clover Flat got into an agreement with Genoa Equipment LLC, Jerome P. Kirkenbach.
Ms. Bailey, I think we are at time now.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there additional public comment?
There is. And Elaine, I'm going to allow you to speak. You can now unmute yourself to address the city council, and you have 4 minutes.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so my name is Elaine DeMann, and I've been a resident of St. Helena for more than 20 years. And I am a University of California certified climate steward. And I want to voice my support for Mayor Jeff Ellsworth and the great work he is doing on all fronts. It's clear that it took bold, decisive action to get the Upper Valley disposal and the Clover Flat landfill to clean up its act in the past. And we have our mayor to thank for that. However, the violations continue. The water boards reported on March 29th, 2019, a notice of violation was issued to the landfill for improper storage of both leachate and stormwater and intentional release of a stormwater leachate mixture into the unnamed creek along the eastern perimeter of the site. On April 10th, 2019, an emergency cleanup and abatement order was issued, which required the landfill to perform corrective actions to address water quality violations and unlawful discharges of landfill leachate to waters of the state. On August 27th, 2019, an amendment was issued to address ongoing sources of sediment due to lack of appropriate erosion and sediment controls at the site and the potential for sediment deposited in 2 unnamed creeks. But perhaps more importantly, Jeff, our mayor, has been a huge advocate of water equity in our community and has been warning anyone who would listen of the impending water crisis since before he was elected to the city council. For any member of this council to try to insinuate that they are somehow the only one recognizing the water crisis we face is not only ludicrous, it is quite frankly dishonest. Anyone who's been paying attention to the water situation, climate change, and the drought knew that this was coming. Anyone paying attention and knew what they were talking about would know that we simply cannot source more water, as Councilmember Hall has suggested in the past. There is no more water to source. The lack of snowpack in the Sierra is a forbidding sign, and the state has already announced it will not be releasing anywhere near the amount of water that has been requested from places like the city of Napa, which is where we get much of our water now. Yes, there is a severe water crisis looming. We just completed the driest winter in recorded history. Neither our reservoir nor our aquifer have recharged. Precipitation that used to fall as snow in the Sierra, where it could be stored until later in the season when it would melt and flow into the state's reservoirs, is now falling as rain. There is no snowbank to draw from. We have overdeveloped and failed to measure the amount of water coming out of the aquifer. We have failed to put restrictions on water-intensive landscaping, such as lawns. But to blame the mayor, who has been warning us of this for years, in order to try and put some weight behind a petty personal grievance is dangerous and self-serving. I trust the citizens of St. Helena and other council members will see through this petty charade and act accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any additional public comment?
There is. Christy, I've just unmuted you and you're allowed to speak. You can unmute yourself and address the city council.
Great, thank you. My name is Christy Pistone and I'm the Chief Operating Officer at UVDS and Clover Flat Landfill. I assumed this role 2 years ago when ownership brought in a new management team to correct serious operating deficiencies. The prior sole manager and operator of a world-renowned leader in reuse and sustainability. His ideas were decades ahead of their time and provided the state of California with much of its current regulatory requirements. That man was my father, Bob Pistone. In 2017, age and illness wore him down and he began to behave differently. He became significantly focused on his own personal interests. He lost connections with his core operational duties. He ignored regulatory issues. He ignored complaints. He stopped listening to professionals because he didn't like what they had to say. He just wanted to focus on his things. Through a difficult process, my father was forced into retirement and a new management team assumed full operating responsibility. This was 2 years ago. Today, UVDS and Clover Flat Landfill are primarily female-owned and managed. Of our 100 employees who live locally and 70% are minority Hispanics, all earning more than minimum wage with medical and pension benefits. The new management team has been led by a team of waste management professionals recruited from the best operations in the nation. Most of all, we have a perfect safety and operation record without a single county or water board violation since the transition 2 years ago. I am proud of our staff. I am proud of my mother for making the difficult decision that enabled us to put this new team in place. Our new policies and procedures make us today one of the best operating waste management companies in the state. We are working hard each day to reclaim our leadership role in reuse and sustainability. I am grateful to Jeff for his help in bringing this new management team and now woman-managed and controlled business to our community 2 years ago. It was Jeff's personal testimony under oath then that allowed us to remove my father and make this change to a new management team. We were able to once again provide state-of-the-art safe waste management services to our community and safe working environment for our employees. I have attached Jeff's signed affidavit for reference. The UVDS crisis ended 2 years ago, and we owe Jeff gratitude for that. That's over and done. But now our community faces a series of other crises today: water, revenue, infrastructure, and housing. We've never faced these sorts of challenges. What's most frightening to me, however, is that Jeff doesn't seem to care. He is surely focused on his own personal interests. He is not listening to the professionals around him. He is ignoring complaints. He has lost connections with his core responsibilities. Does this sound familiar? A recent example: on Friday, March 26, my husband helped city staff determine we will likely be out of water in October unless we make big changes right now. Jeff was notified immediately on March 29th about the severity of the crisis, and the emergency meeting of the council was arranged. The very next day, on March 30th, instead of working on the crisis council with the staff at the time, Jeff drove his van to Davis and met secretly with the waste management operator of Recology to see if they were interested in replacing UVDS. Yes, it seems bizarre, but it's true. The CEO of Recology called me to explain it himself. Jeff doesn't care about water or the penalties all of us are going to pay in this town. He doesn't care about Vineyard Valley residents on fixed incomes or the underprivileged in our community. He doesn't care what the penalties will mean to our wineries in Main Street. Jeff doesn't care because Jeff just cares about himself. He is wasting valuable time and money twisting public forums for his personal use instead of assisting our community. And I would like to call for Jeff to resign.
Thank you for your comments. We'll move on now to our next public comment.
All right. I don't have a last name. Leslie, I'm going to allow you to speak, and you can unmute yourself and address the council. You will have 4 minutes to address the council.
Sorry,
Leslie,
I
you're
just unmuted.
okay. There,
Yeah, I just
there
unmuted.
you go.
Contrary to the person who just gave her testimony, I want to thank Mayor Jeff Ellsworth for his continued efforts to represent public interest and work performed for the public benefit with respect to issues at Clover Flat and UVDS facilities. I have been following issues for the past 7 years with many communications with various government offices. None of them have taken a real interest in the continued issues complaints until Mayor Ellsworth. I thank him for his concern and open view to other possibilities that would serve the community better than what we have now. Jeff does care. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you. Is there additional public comment?
There is. I show someone that phoned in with a phone number ending in 0419. I am going to allow you to speak. You can unmute yourself and address the council, and you will have 4 minutes. Again, that's a phone number ending in 0419. You can unmute yourself to address the council. You might have to hit *9 or *6. All right. Well,
Hello?
there you go. You're unmuted.
Sorry.
You can address the council.
I got confused by the 9 and the 6 and hi, hello, St. Helena City. Let me turn my volume down. Okay. This is Beth Nelson. I'm calling from the city of Napa. I'm also a founding member of the Rainbow Action Network. I think I stood before a few of you 2 years ago and shared with my very personal struggles with depression due to the stigma of being a queer person in Napa County and my story of coming out up in St. Helena Hospital when I was a kid. And the one thing that really stood out to me the last couple of years is Mayor Jeff Ellsworth's commitment to social equity and LGBTQ visibility. Mayor Ellsworth, I have never seen this level of allyship in Napa County from our elected, yet it seems the tides are finally turning, so thank you for being one of the first. I just want to remind you all that Harvey Milk Day is coming up. It will be Saturday, May 22nd. You may know that Harvey Milk was the supervisor of San Francisco who was murdered. Please consider flying the flag from this day, Saturday, May 22nd. It's the perfect day to do that. Through the month of June, which is recognized as Pride Month throughout the world in honor of the anniversary of the Stonewall Riot. On another issue, I had a video that I wanted to share with you as a separate issue as a call to action, but unfortunately the tech team needed a bit more time, so I will attempt to bring it to you in 2 weeks. I want to share that I've been haunted by something a man called Dennis Kelly had said during public comment at the Board of Supervisors. It's been some time now, a couple of years. He's the man who is suffering cancer after living his life under the Clover Flat landfill. I know this is a very contentious issue, and one of you is married to the owner. I want to invite any of you who might like to participate in the film to please get in touch with me. And Christy, if you're listening, or Eric, if perhaps you can pass it on, I would love to talk to you about your business and your father. It'd be great to have your perspective, being the person that's running that landfill. I'm also a little bit disturbed by that call from Christy Pistone stating that Jeff Ellsworth doesn't care about water. As others have said, this could not be further from the truth. Elaine Demand just said it so well. Others have said it. You know, when have you ever seen an elected official take their own time to pursue water leaders and scientists in an effort to educate himself and all of us? His work was stalled by the pandemic, but I know his heart and mind are committed to water in a way I have not seen from most people, at least most white people. Our most precious resource that we have not done well enough to protect is something that has been top issue for Jeff Ellsworth. He has been concerned about this crisis long before some of you were even ready to embrace the climate catastrophe. I do not say this with disrespect. I know a lot of you were not ready to embrace that we have climate change. It is real. It has been upon us. They've been warning about it for 40 years. We only have 9 years left to turn this around. 9 years. That's not a lot. Jeff Ellsworth has been championing this as long as I've ever known him. I mean, I know this is what brought him back to St. Helena, to steward the place that was his home, the place that raised him. So please don't ever disrespect Jeff around climate issues, because it could not be further from the truth. Mayor Ellsworth, thank you for your commitment to public health, public equity, and social justice issues, all of that. If there's anything I can do to ensure we fly those flags again, please reach out to me. Again, I will be in touch. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Is there additional public comment?
Yes, there is. Ms. Holden, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you and allow you to speak to the council. You can go ahead and unmute yourself, and you have 4 minutes to address the council. So, Leah, you can go ahead and unmute yourself and address the council.
Are we not hearing?
Okay. Leah, I'm going to come back to you, and I'm going to go to the next person in line. Okay, I see a Flint Ellsworth. I'm going to allow you to speak and address the city council. You have 4 minutes to address the council.
Thank you. Good evening. This is Flint Ellsworth. I'll be really brief. First, I would hope that council takes Christy Pastone's comments with a grain of salt. Seems an obvious smokescreen that she'd request Jeff to resign. After all, it's her company that has contaminated the Napa River and brought radioactive waste to the Napa Valley. Despite Christie's claim of new management for UVDS and Clover Flat, I think it's important to remember that Christie has worked at UVDS and been in management for most of her adult life. And the problems at the landfill and the Whitehall Ranch have occurred and continue to occur on her watch. Jeff has been a very conscientious mayor throughout the pandemic, multiple fires, and a seemingly everlasting drought. Jeff has kept St. Helena and its citizens first and foremost. He has been doing the right thing, despite the outright hostility of some vested interests and the lack of interest of many citizens, even in the face of drought, fire, and pandemic. And finally, I want to emphasize that these issues, they're not just local issues. They're statewide, nationwide, and they're international. And St. Helena has coming in the spotlight with a lot of these, and there are a lot of eyes watching what's happening here. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there additional comments?
Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Technical difficulties. Okay, I'm not sure if I'm talking in through my computer or phone. Yes, it's the computer. Thank you. Hi, my name is Leah Holden, and I work for Golder Associates. I'm a senior geologist, and I'm just here to comment in response to the comments that were made last March regarding our report for the Clover Flat landfill. And it's just a few items that I feel need some clarity because the data and the information was misinterpreted. So the commenter mentioned fatal risk controls in the notes of the report, which is part of the field person safety check-in. That's a job and safety and environmental analysis tool that we use for the safety assurance of our employees, clients, contractors, and the environment. It's for us to just proactively be aware and evaluate field conditions and apply safety protocols. So the checking the box on the form of that did not indicate that there was a potential to cause a fatality or that anything did not pass, as the commenter suggested. It's just an awareness tool so that no one gets hurt with not following procedures. The commenter also stated that additional fatal risk controls not addressed in the work method statement, that it was checked yes, but there were no notes so that it was incomplete. That's actually not true because the notes were complete. They were just followed on to the next page. So I don't think the commenter saw the notes. The additional factor that the field person noted on that form was the potential for COVID-19 exposure, and his notes further indicate to follow company procedures to protect the field personnel. The commenter didn't mention a report title or a reporting period, only that 2019 laboratory data was not included in the report. Each monitoring report that's produced presents and discusses the current laboratory data, but regardless of the reporting period, cumulative historical lab data is included in the appendix of the report. The eye care representative also commented that the site wells were not fixed and that only 2 wells were functioning. That's true that they weren't sampled in December because at the end of December, those wells were finally replaced. So they are actually there and functioning, and we will be sampling them during this quarter. A report documenting the well replacements is currently in production. So with that, let's see. With regard to the timing of the obstructed wells, it's important to note that because of the glass fire and a number of challenges associated with the COVID-19 pandemic, several unforeseen and unavoidable delays were encountered for all entities and procedures involved with the finalization of those well installations. So they are in and they are functioning. The commenter also stated turbidity and pesticides at location LCS and LEW2, which are landfill leachate collection locations. They are not groundwater, it's leachate. So it's important to note that. And the reference leachate locations are not to be confused with groundwater monitoring wells. The presence of turbidity and pesticides and leachate are not an indicator of pollution in groundwater or the surface water. Leachate is collected and confined and not typically intentionally released into the river, as the commenter stated. Pesticides were not detected in the groundwater during the fourth quarter 2020 event. So the commenter also said that thousands, sometimes hundreds of units per liter of contaminants and other things in the wells, and the wells were high with turbidity. The commenter misinterpreted the data shown in the report. The comment made is vague and difficult to address, but the landfill is in an area of mineralized groundwater, which contains thousands of micrograms per liter of iron, for instance, up gradient and beneath the site. Turbidity is a measure of how murky or clear a water is. High turbidity can be caused by any number of factors, but does not independently indicate contamination. So in summary, to summarize, the fatal risk controls form is a health and safety form used by Golder staff to recognize potential hazards and to provide procedures to avoid them. Historical monitoring data includes 2019 data in Appendix D of the report. And leachate the sample location with the pesticides is a leachate collection point, and no groundwater samples contain pesticides. Naturally occurring minerals show in samples as detected analytes and are not considered to be contaminants. Lastly, high turbidity does not independently indicate contamination in groundwater. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Is there any additional public comment at this point?
I do not see any other hands raised, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for the public comment. We'll now move to our reports by staff and city council, future agenda items, and AB 1234 reports. This is where reports by staff and or city council members on items of general interest. Brief questions for clarification may be posed and answered, and council members may request that items be placed on a future agenda. Except under certain circumstances, the Brown Act prohibits any other discussion or action by the city council. So we'll begin. I'll go to our city staff. We'll begin with our city attorney and request if there's information on our closed session today.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, we did have a closed session prior to this meeting. We discussed 2 items. The first item was discussions regarding real property negotiations, and the subject matter was the price in terms of payment. There's no reportable action on that item. And the second item discussed in closed session was existing litigation based on a lawsuit that was filed by Picasso Incorporated against the city in the Northern District Federal Court. And the reportable action from that item is that the council unanimously directed the city attorney's office to defend the city in the lawsuit. And that was all we had from the closed session. And I have no other report. Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll go to our city manager. And I see we also have a COVID update that'll come in the staff briefing section, but I don't know if the city manager has any other reports.
Thank you, Mayor. No additional reports at this time. Thank you.
Okay, great. And we'll go to our finance director.
No additional reports tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Our city clerk.
Nothing to report.
And our public works.
Mr. Mayor and council members, I'll go ahead and step in. I know Clayton's on the line as well, but Clayton and I wanted to give you a real brief report that staff is continuing to work on long-term projections for the water situation. And today we had a great meeting with Matt O'Connor of O'Connor Environmental, who's done a lot of hydrogeologic work. And Matt, coincidentally, has done a lot of watershed analysis for the Bell Canyon Reservoir. And we're going to be working cooperatively with him to take some of his data and include it in our models. And hopefully by the next council meeting, we could provide you with some good long-term model projections. So that's all I had for tonight.
Very good. And that's excellent to hear. Thank you. We'll move now to our planning and building.
Good evening. Nothing to report.
Very good. And we'll move to our police and fire. Do we have a representative here this evening? Seeing none, we'll move then to our council members. We have Councilmember Hall.
No further updates.
Thank you. Councilmember Chateau.
Nothing to report.
Councilmember Hardy.
Yes, I think I can be brief here. I have done some research of my own regarding the water quality samples, reporting and analysis at Clover Flat. My conclusions, I think, although, I covered a different range of data from that discussed by Leah Holden in public comments. I reached the same conclusion. I think much of what is in the reports has been misunderstood and inaccurately incorporated into public comments that we've received. But I'm basing that on looking at the reports myself and a series of conversations with Regional Water Quality Control Board staff. And that's all I have for now. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. And Vice Mayor Doring.
Nothing to report. Thank you.
Thank you. So I just have a few comments here. This recently article came out that the Vine Trail is to begin construction of the Calistoga to St. Helena link this fall. So that's good news for the community. That's just recently come out. Our vaccination program with our working with the St. Helena Hospital has been really tremendous. And we want to continue to say thank you to everybody participating in that, the community members, the fire and police department, and of course, St. Helena Hospital and the Upper Valley campus of Napa Valley College. Really a tremendous partnership with the city and the community, vaccinating not just folks in St. Helena, but throughout the county as well. I was also and many community volunteers, which is wonderful to see. Also, Community Action Napa Valley, who runs our local food banks, has been asking for a Up Valley volunteer, be it an elected or a staff member for one of our Up Valley cities, Yountville, Calistoga, or St. Helena. I have an email that I'll send out tomorrow to our council and staff, also to the mayors and city managers of Yountville and Calistoga with a little more information on that. If somebody is interested, it would be great to have a voice on that board. Mayor Garcia from American Canyon sits on that board, and it would be, and does an excellent job, and it would be great to have some voice from the Up Valley as well. The conversation continues countywide as we get into COVID recovery phases of making sure that we're doing all we can to support our businesses who have a long way to go to catch up. Part of the conversation, and Yountville moved forward with approving their COVID measures in terms of outdoor dining and seating and planning approaches for businesses through COVID. In Yountville, they voted to extend those until the middle of 2022 to see what the whole year looks like in terms of comeback. And it's something that was suggested that we all the cities in Napa County look for a uniform approach to this. So I just want to suggest that we find a time to agendize that fairly soon to discuss how we can, keep these measures in place to support our businesses and remain consistent with the rest of the county. What's been really remarkable in this whole pandemic is the communication between all the jurisdictions, so that we've stayed consistent whether we were drawing down or coming back up. So I just want to put that point out there to consider getting on the agenda soon so we can make sure our businesses feel supported as we move into the next year. So that is it for me. And we'll move now to past our presentations and public recognitions. That is going to be the PG&E item will be postponed until the 27th, and we'll go to our staff briefing. This is the city manager COVID update. Oh, I think we've got to mute Mark.
Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and you should see a COVID-19 page. Everyone can see that okay? If you nod your head, I'll see you. Okay. So a few changes. The news is getting better from a statewide perspective. That said, the numbers in Napa County have increased in just the past couple of days. So we've had some fairly high numbers, relatively speaking, recently. And we want to obviously continue to practice appropriate protocols to keep those numbers in check. This reference here is This is from the state website, covid19.ca.gov. And the governor has announced a goal to fully reopen on June 15th. That does depend on low hospitalization rates. These rates staying low. They are very low today, which is good. It relies on the vaccine availability remaining high. And you've probably noticed that the Johnson & Johnson vaccine has been paused for now, so that may impact some of these plans. But knowing that this is the goal, and we're not too far out from that, this website, the goal is to get there by that date, but at the same time, we remain in a moderate tier and have still some additional progress to make with respect to moving through the tiers. So on this same website, from the state's website, people can learn more about the vaccination process. We'll take a look at the county tier information. And this is what the state looks like today statewide. And you can see that about 80%, more than 80% of the state is in the moderate or minimal range, and that includes Napa County. Napa County moved in about a week ago. We do have a risk of moving back to red if the numbers don't stabilize in Napa County, but they do take into consideration continued vaccination across the state. And so we're hopeful that our numbers will decline in the coming days and that the forecast looking forward looks promising. So I'm happy to answer any additional questions that people have, and I'll stop sharing my screen now. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the council? Okay, very good. We will then, we appreciate it. And to the community, what a challenging year. We are still working through this. So it's continuing the protocol, the masks, the watching of the distance and the washing the hands as we move forward with the stability of the vaccinations. Just want to keep reminding the community that if we all keep working on the protocols, it gives us a better shot at getting all the way back as soon as possible. So thank you very much, everybody, for all the focus this last year. With that, then we'll move to our consent items. And this is where members of the council or the public may ask that any items be considered individually for purposes of considering alternative action, for extended discussion, or for public comment. Unless that is done, one motion may be used to adopt all recommended actions. We've seen that item 9.1 will be continued to April 27th. And I'm just going to read through the numbers. If anybody has a hand to put up, please do so. I'll move now to 9.2, 9.3, 9.4, 9.5, and 9.6. And seeing no hands, no one wanting to pull an item, I'll ask for a motion to pass the consent calendar.
I move to pass the consent calendar with the exclusion of 9.1.
Thank you.
I'll second.
And a roll call, please.
Councilmember Chateau,
Yes.
Councilmember Hall,
Yes.
Hardy,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Doring,
Yes.
Mayor Ellsworth.
Yes. Very good. So that is our consent calendar. We'll move now to public hearings. And this is item 10.1. This is consideration and approval of a resolution adopting a penalty structure for a violation of the city's Phase 2 and Phase 3 water regulations set forth in the St. Helena Municipal Code Section 13.04.220. And this is being presented by April Mitz, Dr. April Mitz, our finance director.
Great, thank you very much.
I'm seeing a hand from Councilmember Chateau.
Yes, I'm recusing myself from this discussion on this matter because my husband works for Hall Wines, and the council's decision with regard to the penalty structure could have a material financial impact on their business. So I will be getting off Zoom. And if the city clerk could please text me when this agenda item is done. Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll bring it back and we'll go to Dr. Mitz to lead us into this discussion. And we will have
Great,
public.
thank you.
Please
Thank you very much.
So thank you very much. So just as a refresher, at the March 23rd, 2021 City Council meeting, Raftellus did present their recommended penalty structure to the City Council for consideration, which will be implemented during, the penalty structure will be implemented during both the Phase 2 and Phase 3 water regulations. The overall goal of the penalty structure is to ensure compliance with the required conservation measures to essentially ensure that the city has enough water to provide the necessities. The proposed penalty structure that was recommended by Raftellus and brought back before you tonight is a tiered volumetric structure. And what this has done, this is intended to minimize penalties for those users that are barely exceeding the water usage allocation and where the water use can be reasonably reduced below the allocated water use in the subsequent months. So based on the feedback from City Council at the March 23rd meeting, this item is being brought back as a public hearing for discussion and potential adoption. So as a quick refresher, the tiered volumetric structure, and this is the ranges that are presented as is, knowing that council can determine if they like to change some of the structure up, and we can still adopt this tonight if it's feasible. So the volume exceeded, if it's less than 25% over their monthly allocation, it would be $10 per HCF. And remember, 1 HCF is equal to 748 gallons of water. So that equates to a penny per gallon over if they're 0 to 25% over their allocation. If it's between 25% and 50% over their allocation, the HCF per HCF, it would be $25, which equates to 3 cents per gallon. If it's between 50% and 100% over, it's $100 per HCF, which equates to 13 cents per gallon. And then over 100% over their monthly allocation, it's $250 per HCF, which equates to 33 cents per gallon. So the resolution as it's currently written right now would start enforcing the penalties beginning with the May 2021 usage. So the first penalty bill would actually come in June. So it's for any usage starting on May 1st. If it is adopted, within the next week, the city will mail notifications to all water customers on their monthly allocation that is allowed through the city's municipal code. Once it's actually implemented, customers will receive a monthly notification on their monthly water use, as well as if they've exceeded, if they have any overages, and then what the penalties being assessed are going to be. And the penalties will be applied directly to the customer's account with the city. Also, there are exceptions within the city's municipal code. So the city's municipal code does recognize that the water allocations afforded in the code are definitely not a one-size-fits-all. And because of this, the municipal code does allow water users to apply for a water allocation exception. And these exceptions are applied for either through the Public Works Department or through the Water Advisory Board. And staff is making the recommendation after meeting with the business community last Thursday, having conversations with several of the large wineries, as well as other large customers. We are making the recommendation, particularly for the wineries, due to the timing of their operations. Right now, the municipal code for the water use, it's based off of 10% less than their 4-month winter average, which is December through March. And you know, being in the Napa County, we know the busiest time for the wineries is typically September, October, November. And so based on that and based off of some conversations with different wineries, we are making the recommendation that due to the timing of the wineries operations, that the classification of wineries as a whole be taken to the Water Advisory Board for consideration of an exception. And so this is something that we are looking to start having the advisory board. They will meet at least once monthly. I'm almost anticipating at the beginning of this process, it might have to be a little bit more than that because we know that these penalties are going to be coming up. In addition, staff has drafted a standard operating procedure, which will be presented to the Water Advisory Board on how they will actually work with any types of exceptions that come their way. Outreach, we know during this very important time frame with the water allocations, the drought situation that the entire state of California is in, we do want to try to keep the public up to speed as much as possible. And so what we are doing is we're constantly updating the city's website. So if you go to the front page on the website, the left-hand side says Hot Topics. If you click on Hot Topics, the second item down is water, currently the phase 2 water regulations. And that is where we're putting all the information. We're also providing links to all the staff reports and everything that goes to City Council. So we want to try to capture everything in one location so it's an easy reference point for us. We've even had some great recommendations from the items are in other parts of our website that residents have been asking us for, so we're making sure that we put it right on that front page so it's front and center. The overall fiscal impact for the phase 2 and potentially if we do get to a phase 3 emergency, there's several different fiscal impacts that are outlined in the staff report. So the first is the drought rates, which went into effect effective July 1st. So that went into effect as soon as we entered into a phase 1 drought regulations. The drought rates are 6% above what the normal rates are for usage for the water side. We know with the asking of all of our water customers that we will have a decrease in consumption, which is really good because based on the analytics from Raftellus, under a phase 2, we are looking to achieve an overall 30% reduction. When we look at looking at if every classification does a 30% reduction in their water use, we're looking at an estimated annual decrease in revenues of about $1.26 million. And so it is quite significant, some of the decrease in consumption that we're looking at, but we also know that we do have to try to preserve our current water that we have in our reservoirs. We know that another fiscal impact is additional staffing and outreach. We did sign an agreement with Raftellus over the past week to actually have their marketing arm, which we're really excited about because the person who heads up their marketing arm is actually the president of the American Water Works Association. So she is very in tune with what is going on with water, with the drought, and she has helped other agencies similar to ours actually getting that drought message out and the conservation message out. And so they've already put together one flyer for us that went out to the business community through the chamber last Thursday at our meeting. And then we're planning on just continuing this, including with the door hangers if we see any violations from any of our public works crews are out there. So we're working on that constant messaging that conservation really is the key. And then the last fiscal impact, obviously, that we're talking about tonight is the penalty structure. The overall fiscal impact, we don't know what that's going to be because obviously we don't want to have to charge penalties, but we also know that it's a mechanism to try to encourage conservation. And so part of the penalties, it really is dependent on how the different customer classes respond to the conservation ask, the overall 30% reduction for the city. Portion of any of the penalties that are collected on the city's behalf, they will go directly into the Water Operations Fund, and they will go directly towards all things water. Part of it is going to be recovering a portion of the financial deficit that is created by the water shortage conditions, because we do know that we do have some pretty significant water projects that are coming down the pipeline that we do need to adhere to, and we still need to be able to pay for those. We are also looking at implementing a range of actions to reduce water use and to help ensure that future water demand for water doesn't exceed supply during other water shortage situations. Such things are the public outreach campaigns, which I've already touched on, water efficiency, customer assistance, and rebate programs, which we do currently have some rebate programs, but this will allow us to help potentially have more robust programs. To address any operational changes that we might need to consider during any phase 2 or phase 3 water emergencies. If we need to implement any type of water waste patrols and or if we need to send staff out based on any calls that we come in where somebody might report some type of overwater use. The funds can also go towards the installation of purple pipe, or any other tertiary treatments. So that's something that in more looking future-wise, implementing some of those changes today would only help us tomorrow. And then the other thing that we had also been looking at is installation of automatic metering infrastructure, or what they call AMI, which will allow for advanced meter data collection and management. That is something that we looked at doing during the last rate study. And unfortunately, to try to even lower the rates a little bit more, that was taken out of one of the CIP projects. But it's something that, you know, dependent on what the penalty collections are, we can utilize some of those resources to be able to start implementing that technology. So future on down the line, we can have on-demand, you know, look at people's usage, and as well as customers can look at it on demand. So with that, I will leave it up to council questions and or discussion on implementation of the second of the penalty phases. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a few brief comments, and I'll open it up to the council. When recently, when Raftellus came back with their recommendations that we're able to, in a sense, look at the on the residential side, find a way to contain the situation to manageable area in terms of penalties, and some concern came from some of the larger users. And what it looks like we've done is create a pathway for those discussions. Want to make sure that, you know, what we want to do is provide equitable water service to all our customers, all different sizes. I sometimes liken it to a drip irrigation line that has small plants and large plants on the same line. They all need a specific range of water for themselves, but it's a different range for different size users. And so as we work through this, we're, you know, in a challenging water year, we've got to work to make sure everybody can get through this. And so the discussion we want to make sure is open to hearing what we need to consider in terms of making sure those balances work. So thank you folks for being here and being part of this conversation. And are there any initial comments or questions from council? I'm seeing Councilmember Hardy.
Thank you, Mayor Ellsworth. I do have some questions for Dr. Mitz regarding the projection that implementation of phase 2 will result in a 30% reduction. Understanding that our existing structure doesn't really work with respect to businesses where the water use varies significantly over the course of a year. You know, what assumptions were made about our large users with respect to phase 2 and this reduction? It seems to me that would be hard to calculate.
The analysis for the overall 30% reduction was actually conducted by Raftellus, and that was part of the report that went to City Council on the 23rd. Unfortunately, we do not have Raftellus here tonight to be able to talk about their methodology for that, but that was their methodology. And one of the items that we did, you know, in talking to a couple different particular wineries over the past 2 weeks since the last council meeting, is one of the things that we're potentially looking at that might be a recommendation to the Water Advisory Board for an exception would be maybe we look at totality, maybe we look at a 30% reduction over the course of a year or over the course of 6 months, as opposed to a month-by-month basis, to make sure that we can still overall get to that 30% reduction to be able to save our reservoirs, but also knowing that the timing of their operations is definitely much different than what how the allocation reads in the municipal code.
Well, that leads me, thank you, to a follow-up question then. Is there any inherent feasibility obstacle in terms of staff resources in changing the methodology for seasonal users so that the baseline from which the reduction is required is analyzed month by month? In other words, rather than look at the average of the winter months over the previous 3 non-drought years. Would it be possible instead to look for each such user at the average of January, February, and so on, so that on a month-by-month basis, you know what the past average was and what the reduction should be?
Yeah, we can definitely through our city's financial software system, we can pull it up on a month-by-month basis. The only differential we would have is in those rare cases where we haven't been able to actually read the meter during a particular month. More recently, the glass fire, that was one of those cases. So we can pull up the data from our software system. However, if we looked at each individual non-residential user, because right now the residential allocation per the municipal code is 65 gallons per day per person in the household, plus an allocation for an additional allocation during the summertime for landscaping. Plus there's another exception they can apply for if they have over so many square feet in their of the lot size alone. But what it would do is if you did it for each individual non-residential, at that point you would be granting exceptions from the municipal code for every other user. So that's why the recommendation would almost be to look at it on a class-by-class basis and take it to the Water Advisory Board, knowing that every user, every system-wide city user does have the ability to go to the Water Advisory Board to file for an exemption. Did that answer your question?
Well, my question was as to feasibility, and I'm asking that because I'm not, at least initially, a big fan of the Band-Aid approach. The flaw is structural. It's built into the existing ordinance, and I don't see on the sort of drafting side any obvious impediment to amending the ordinance so that we have a structure that works for large users or any commercial users where the actual water use is seasonal. So I'd rather, if a categorical fix is available, handle it that way as opposed to burdening the exception process. Or to put it differently, it seems to me that the exception process is designed and best used to deal with individual exceptions, not categorical problems. And my other concern about it is that taking this exception route, unless I'm missing something, makes the outcome, at least from where we sit right now, much less predictable. And one of the most important things for us in order to manage our supply moving through the coming months and with real uncertainty as to what next winter will bring is the ability to measure our progress towards defined goals in reduction, and while understanding how we're going to get there, and while understanding what our users need to know and be able to do in order to get there. So I think that's something that really gets challenged when we have to go through what's potentially a complex exception process before we really know what to expect. So I'm inclined to think that it's an appropriate subject for an urgency ordinance myself, but we can save that for later discussion after we've taken public comment.
Thank you. Are there any other council comments before we get into public comment? Okay, not seeing any council. I'm seeing Vice Mayor Doring.
Thank you. I'm a little slow on the raised hand today. Great observations by Council Member Hardy on that issue. One of the things I think we need to drill down on is what it would be the percentage reduction if we took it on a sort of an annual basis, a month by month average, what would that reduction be? I don't know. We'd have to figure that out to make sure that each class is reducing in the same fair fashion. But the question I had, one of the comments, Dr. Mitch, you made was that there's an exception process, and you said that a resident or business could go to the Public Works Director or the Water Advisory Board. And I just wanted to clarify that. Are they mutually exclusive, or could somebody start with the Public Works Director and then maybe sort of appeal that, or go to our higher body with the Water Board? I just wanted to have clarification there. And then I was wondering, did we ever determine what the total cost would be for the AMI, just in rough numbers, for our city? Thank you for your work on this issue.
Thank you. To address, I'll first address the AMI. And this again was from years ago, but the last rate study, I believe it was about $500,000 to purchase the equipment and about another $500,000 for infrastructure. Those were numbers about 5 years ago. So I think there is some newer technology out there, and I'm sure things have changed. But that would be the starting point, but it's something that we would definitely, I would seek guidance from Public Works on that. And as far as the exception process, they are not mutually exclusive. So there's actually, the Public Works Director can handle certain things within the parameters. And if it's outside of those parameters, it's the Water Advisory Board. But then how it's set up is if, let's say, the Public Works Director makes a determination and maybe denies something, an appeal can be brought to the Water Advisory Board. Any decision by the Water Advisory Board can then be appealed up to the City Council. So you do have those appeal levels as well. And part of the process that we're developing, it's a standard operations procedure. And it's something per the municipal code that the Water Advisory Board gives their seal of approval on it, is that what we are trying to do is develop a real quick short form. So that way when things are processed, everything we get funneled first through the Public Works Department, to go, okay, does it go to the Public Works Director or to the Water Advisory Board? And it's a quick check the box, give us your reason why, provide us your supporting documentation. So that way it's very consistent across all users.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other council comment before we go to public comment? Seeing none, I will open the public comment and see if we have any hands raised. I'll go to our city clerk.
I'm looking, just one moment. I do see one hand raised. And Ms. Malin, I'm going to allow you to speak. You have 4 minutes. You can unmute yourself. You have 4 minutes to address the council.
Hi there, Chris Malin. I'm speaking on my own personal behalf. So I haven't read this penalty structure for violation of cities phase 1 or phase 2 and 3, but I was listening and I didn't see any provision for disadvantaged communities. We have 9 disadvantaged communities in Napa County, and I'm pretty sure there are some in St. Helena, and there certainly are people who struggle to make ends meet. And I know that our farm workers and our low-income families could be hit with what you might think are dollars and pennies, but sometimes that's buying formula or food for children. And I think that this program should make sure that we aren't disproportionately affecting families that are disenfranchised and are in the low income category. And it seems to me that we don't want to hurt those people, but yet we want them to, conserve water also. So maybe there can be, like PG&E has a program called the CARE program, and people who qualify as disabled or low income qualify for a much lower rate. for their PG&E. It's sort of subsidized by PG&E, and it's very helpful. So there could be a similar approach on this. We need to make sure that the people that are using the most water, and certainly it would be in the wine industry, which is frankly non-essential. It's non-essential. I know that it is definitely an economic driver, but in terms of what it does for the community, for public health and food and shelter and all of that, we need to, make sure that the people that are using the most water for non-essential reasons don't get the escape hatch with exceptions, because that could subsidize the people who can't afford the dollars and the pennies at the end of the week to feed their children and make their budgets work out so that they can take care of their families. So I didn't hear that there's that consideration, and maybe there is, maybe it's built in, and I'm just, talking for nothing, but I just wanted to mention it. I think it's well worth your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll move to additional public comment.
I think it would be important to address that very quickly, right? Could we just address that comment very quickly? Because I think there is a mechanism.
Mr. Doring, I was going to circle back at the end with a list, but if you think it's this is the time, then certainly let's jump on it. Dr. Mintz, do we have a response in terms of how we make sure that our disadvantaged communities have support through something like this?
Yes, thank you very much. The city does currently have a policy in place, and it's based off of PG&E CARES program. So if you are qualified for PG&E CARES program, you automatically qualify for the city's CARES program. And what that program does, it gives the individual property owner, it gives them 50% off of their base rates for both their water and their wastewater. And that automatically comes off on their monthly bill. So we do have that program in place right now for our current customers. As far as anything for the penalty structure, there are certain, one of the exceptions that's allowable is if there is somebody who has a medical need, that is something that's allowable where they actually are given additional allocation under our current municipal code.
Thank you. Additional comment?
I see someone that called in with the phone number ending in 5662. I'm going to allow you to speak. You can unmute yourself and address the city council. You will have 4 minutes to address the council.
Hi, good evening. Am I on?
Yes.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. I've had verbal conversations with a couple of the city council members, and I think it's important to bring this out to the public's notice as well. But when the city conducted the allocation survey, they used as a fallback number 2 occupants for every house. And in the interest of trying to conserve as much as we can, there are quite a few residences in St. Helena where there is only one person in the home. And I just think in the interest of being as equitable as we can, that survey should go out again, asking for comments from the public, and basically say, instead of being given 2 allocations, if they don't answer the survey, it should be 1. And I just wanted to make that point, and I thank you very much.
Thank you. Is this Mr. Belt?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Thank you. And we'll move.
We have an
back to
additional public comment.
Very good.
Okay, Mr. Torres, I'm going to allow you to speak. You can unmute yourself and address the city council, and you will have 4 minutes.
Okay, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay. Mr. Mayor and Council, thanks for giving me the opportunity. And first of all, I just wanted to thank, it seems that the city and Dr. Mitt's presentation is open to the fact that wineries are a much different water user than the rest of the residents say. So we probably use almost half the water we use all year in a period of 4 months, and that's during crush. It's very important that we have that water. It's really the lifeblood of winemaking. I know a lot of you know that. And, you know, we've been here for over 71 years and been a big part of the community. And it seems like the one thing that always comes up is water use, right? And droughts. I actually served on the Water Advisory Board back in the 90s. So I have a pretty good understanding of the challenges the city and the district has. So, and just so you know a little bit about my company, we have a team of environmentalists, and we are looking at our water use every day, all throughout the year. We have meters that automatically fill in the data. Our winemakers, our environmentalists. We also look at our power use, our solids waste flows. As a matter of fact, right now, we probably divert almost 99% of our solid waste from the landfill. So, and we got a big initiative now for reducing our greenhouse gas footprint with the big solar and battery storage systems throughout our facilities. So water is a big issue. We got a bunch of initiatives we're working on right now. And in light of this phase 2, we're gonna fast track those and get those online as fast as we can, so we can really minimize the amount of water that we're going to put on the demand of the system. So you all have my letter, I believe, in your packet.
Yes.
Yeah. Do you have that letter?
Yes.
Yeah. And, you know, based on the original allocation of the winter months, our calculations basically came out to penalties anywhere from $2.7 million to $5.4 million during the harvest months. So, and the other months also. And it's primarily because we don't use that as much water during the winter as we do during the harvest. So it's refreshing to hear that the city and the district is going to sit down and work with us. I would suggest that maybe we get all the stakeholder wineries together and talk about their flows, and maybe to us, I think a month-to-month allocation based on the previous year's harvest is probably going to be the best way to go. And talking to our team, if we do it that way, we feel really confident we're going to be able to meet the reductions in use with some of these new initiatives, as well as some other things we're working on. So, you know, harvest, it's a funny thing. You can have a big harvest, you can have a short harvest, you can have a front-loaded harvest. So it all, you know, we're kind of at the mercy of Mother Nature to that extent. But, you know, we look forward to really sitting down with the advisory board or whatever committee to kind of hammer out what a fair and allocation should be. So we look forward to that. No, my time's up.
Thank you for the comments. So we appreciate that we're all going to have to be innovative and focused on whatever size we are, what we can do. So it's appreciated. Are there any other comments, public comments coming in?
I am not seeing any other hands raised and no other public comment.
Okay, I'll come back to the council here. I just make a few brief comments. I also support an urgency ordinance where we look at how we can do this in a categorical, systematic way. And so I support Councilmember Hardy's bringing that forward, and want to look to our staff to see what it would take to bring something like that forward, where we're taking the input of the stakeholders, understanding what their needs are. As we said, different size users have different needs. We want to make sure that everybody gets through this. We do have to consider that large users, if they take a large drink, it's different than a small user taking a large drink of water. And so we need to make sure that we're looking at all aspects of it. And I think the urgency ordinance with a categorical approach makes sense. So Dr. Mitz, what would you imagine that process is to move forward with an urgency ordinance where we analyze that input from the stakeholders and put something together?
Yeah, the next steps for that is part of Raftelis's recommendation during the last city council meeting was actually they recommended reevaluating the allocation basis that's currently in our municipal code. And so following that meeting, we did actually sign an additional amendment to that portion of their contract to have them start doing that work. So I can reach out to Raftelis probably as early as tomorrow and get Kevin to work on that, because I agree looking at it system-wide as opposed to just piecemealing it is probably the best thing, and I want to get their analytics on it since they are the experts in the allocation basis. And while they said the way that ours is broken down, there's nothing wrong with it, but there could be things that we could be doing better. So I can reach out to Raftelis, and so we can have them start working on the reevaluating the current allocation process.
And would you imagine that would come back at the next council meeting, or in 2 council meetings? Is there a sort of a time frame? I know we're getting towards the season here, where we want to make sure everybody's feels that we've got the system in place.
I will definitely check with Raftelis on that one, because I know that they are very analytical in their approach, and I wouldn't want to rush something through to try to do a patch when we know currently right now our municipal code does allow for exceptions. So we do have a way to do the exceptions now. But I will get with Raftelis, and we'll definitely we'll at least maybe even do a staff briefing at the next council meeting to maybe give a timeline as far as how long it would actually take them to do an analysis.
Okay, thank you. Are there other comments? I'm seeing Councilmember Hall.
Thank you, Mayor. Dr. Mitz, I was just curious. I was just looking at the penalty structure. Maybe Raftelis could clarify sort of tiers 3 and 4, where the step up in the penalty seems to jump quite significantly. Obviously, that sort of overage use we're trying to mitigate as much as possible. I'm just wondering if there's any other indicators in their model that perhaps reducing that a little bit instead of jumping up to $250 or something like that, that number comes down at all. Not sure if it makes sense. I know that they looked at many different cities in their analysis.
Yeah, they did a comparison to other cities, and that's where they came up with that price point in their recommendation. Again, that is their recommendation. Council does have the ability, because this is going to be a policy determination, where that can be lowered. I did follow up with Kevin during this past week and asked them if for some reason any of those tiers were lowered, particularly the 3 and the 4 tier, if they felt like that would kind of mitigate what we're trying to do with the penalty. And he said no, he did not think it would mitigate it. So that would just completely be a council policy, is if you wanted to actually change any of those actual dollar amounts for any of those 4 tiers.
Okay, thank you.
And I'm seeing Councilmember Hardy.
Thank you. Just had to find my cursor there to unmute. Well, I really don't think there's anything terribly complicated to crafting a calculation of base use, an amendment to the ordinance that allows commercial base use to be established by reference to monthly use as opposed to the winter period. And the structural problem is I understand, and I think this is really how it happened. We are in the habit, and it works very well in normal rainfall years with residential use. We look at the winter period as being about indoor use, and everything else we know is generally going to be irrigation. And with residential users, then that winter period is a really good way to understand what the indoor use is. And then we've made a policy decision for residences to, in effect, by looking at our historic information about indoor use, we've set a per person allocation. And I think that probably works pretty well for most residents. The problem with our commercial side is that we're mandating a 10% reduction, but we're using this same winter period, and it's borrowed from a residential setting. So there are a whole number of problems in applying that to commercial use, but the biggest one is the one that our large users have brought forward, which is that their use is very strongly seasonal, with 50% of the production-related water demand occurring in what's probably at most a 4-month period. So I don't think we need to overthink how to do that. In fact,
Can I make a suggestion?
I really want to volunteer the time and effort, but I could have a draft ready within a week. I wouldn't want to present anything without presenting it first to staff, but this is something we can do, and I think it's really important that we do it as quickly as we can.
Thank you, Councilmember Hardy. I was just going to volunteer you.
Well, I volunteered myself.
I want to just check on the with staff here and with city attorney is if Councilmember Hardy is seeing a sort of a clear path on how to put something like this together, can we set something up like that he can be part of a work team to get something forward as quickly as possible? Can I ask the city manager if that looks like a pathway here?
It's certainly a pathway. I noticed that our city attorney was about to jump in on the conversation, so I think we also want to make sure that we have an ability to turn around items quickly. And so Ethan, I want to invite you to make some comments if you have any on that topic.
The only comments I had is that I'll make myself available as needed to turn around as quickly as I can. And Councilmember Hardy's participation, that's at the council's discretion. If you all agree that you would like him to participate, then absolutely, he certainly can.
And I'll put that to the council just to make sure we've got support on that.
That sounds terrific.
Okay.
Just one
Thank
question
you,
on the urgency ordinance. Mr. Walsh, do you think we have the ability to make findings for the urgency?
I do. I think this is,
okay.
It's a means to get to the point where we can conserve the water, and it's our situation with the water is, in my mind, the definition of an emergency. So.
And that's a 4/5 vote at minimum?
Correct. So in this instance,
would that be affected by the recusal of any council member?
It would be. So with the group that we have before us, it would have to be a unanimous vote.
And I would just like to add that my part of my motivation in making this proposal is that I see a path in which we can provide more certainty and clarity for our large users, which will enable them then to do a better job of helping us save water. And so I anticipate a scenario in which we present a draft and we'll get comment, and maybe we'll decide that it's not ready that meeting and we have to revise it and bring it back at another meeting. But I think the sooner we get to that initial discussion in a setting where all the affected users have notice and the opportunity to comment, the better the result we'll get. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that makes a lot of sense. One of the comments that had come from one of the large users was making sure also in terms of notification, nobody wants to wake up with a penalty that is beyond reasonable. And so that sort of timing factor of how they would can be looked at, I think, as well in terms of an ordinance. So appreciate it, everybody, the focus on it. Are there any other council comments? And I'm seeing our city clerk and then Councilmember Hall.
Just double checking that it was a consensus of all the council members present that Councilmember Hardy was going to be with assisting with the working group.
Yes.
Yes.
And Councilmember Hall, I see your hand.
Thank you. I was just going to say before we move out this, I've just glancing through some of the other public comments. I just noted one question in there about the state's use of water in fighting the glass fire. Obviously, it was to help protect our community. Is there any sort of compensation back from the state, or have we explored that at all? Do we know how much water was involved, or?
We don't know how much water is involved. We have checked into that, and April, I don't know if it's still an open question, but I think we've run into challenges with our ability to understand how much was taken.
Okay.
Yeah, there was two challenges. One was the inability to know exactly how much water was taken, because during the first couple days of the fire, they were just getting as much water as they could on the fires as quickly as possible. And then the other consideration, just so you are aware of it, is if any residential like households had water used during the fires to fight the fires, for instance, from their swimming pools, from any tanks, anyone who has contacted us, what we've done is that we've actually looked at the usage. We can see where things have spiked, and we've actually provided refunds to those particular individuals as we're notified of them.
Mr. Presswich?
Just another comment on timing. So in terms of timing right now, tonight with this is a public hearing, so there's a notice requirement for us before we can act on an item like this. And when I'm looking at the timing of this, we were looking at potentially having May as a test run for everyone so that we would be able to provide information on what the usage looked like before penalties would have been established in June. So with an urgency ordinance that allows for an immediate adoption of that, there's going to also be a noticing requirement, I believe, and the city attorney can confirm that. So we're going to need to finish. There's an advantage, I guess is my bottom line. There's an advantage of finishing before the end of the month and having adequate time to post this agenda item and act on it. So that's the challenge for us, is working with our staff, our city attorney, our council member, and our consulting assistants. So I think our goal needs to be to try to have this acted upon before the end of the month. Otherwise, we'll have to essentially push out a full month.
Yeah, and I think, or I know that we want to move on this as quickly as possible. So thank you for putting that out there, and I'm sure whatever we can do to be supportive of that, please let us know. We want to make sure that this gets done. And I'm seeing Councilmember Hall.
Thank you, Mayor. I was just thinking what other comment I've heard recently, and maybe the process is these things get escalated to the advisory board or to Public Works initially, but part of our challenge here is that we don't have a huge amount of data that we need to make good decisions, right? So no matter what we come up with, I think Councilmember Hardy's idea is going to get us a lot closer to something that's going to reflect reality. But at the end of the day, it's an individual by individual pain point for everybody in the community. So I was thinking there are pockets in our community of people who use water but don't own or control the meter. And this would be multifamily residences or communities that are like that, such as Vineyard Valley, where you have users, but they're not really the person getting the water bill or the penalties. So I'm just wondering if those residents see some inequity, how do we address these issues, or have we had a chance to think about any of that yet?
I think those are excellent points. Dr. Mitz, do we have any thoughts there? And perhaps this is also what we can circle in on with a large group of users who may be in that situation. Do we have any structure to look at that yet?
I have actually already spoken with Vineyard Valley. I talked to them last week and just wanted to make sure that they were aware of what was coming and talk to them and try to help them through the process. And so I have been in active conversations with them, and they are going to, they just reached out the other day, and I'm talking about it tomorrow morning. Weekly, we're having phase 2 water regulation meetings with staff just to determine what needs to happen next. And so that's one of the conversations, because they are also allowed to apply for an exception based on their square footage of landscape property. And when I did the initial numbers on it, it looks like they're actually using less than what their actual allocation would be under the formulas, which is a great thing. As far as the other multifamily, I've not spoken with them. I just spoke with Vineyard Valley because they are one of the largest, and I have not spoken with them directly. And so I don't know if Mark, if you have any other comments on that.
The only other comment is that we have run numbers on commercial and residential customers to understand who are the largest 10% in each category. And we intend to communicate with the larger users to be sure that they're aware of the challenge ahead, that they're aware of the penalty structure that likely will be adopted, and to work with them cooperatively to reduce water usage.
As we get in deeper into this communication, hearing from folks, having the water advisory board in place. So if things come up as we go, us being proactive, but also having that mechanism for taking feedback, so we can make sure that if we need to make adjustments in real time, we can do so. So thank you. And I'm seeing Councilmember Hardy.
Yes, just briefly, I'm committed to having a draft ready for staff to review by the first part of next week. In fact, my whole proposal is really very much made with concern that we get some clarity on this in time for our users to go into May, the critical months vis-a-vis the penalty ordinance, knowing what the program is. And again, so that we on the city side have the benefit of knowing how to project. So I will be the annoying person who puts the ball in staff's court quickly.
Thank you. Thank you for jumping onto this. It's very much appreciated.
Mayor, I had one more suggestion just for the sake of efficiency. Since we are planning to try and bring this back at your next meeting, with regard to the hearing issue that Mark raised, the council has the ability to continue this hearing to a date certain. So you could continue it to your next meeting, and then staff doesn't have to renotice it. That will just save us some time and confusion potentially if the council would just move to continue this hearing to your next regular meeting, then we don't have to renotice it.
Okay, so we just take a motion for that.
Yes.
Okay, I would move to continue this to the next meeting. Do I need to say it specifically or just this item and get a second on
Yeah,
that?
it's just to continue the public hearing to the council's next regular meeting.
Okay, so I'll make a motion to continue the public hearing to the next regular meeting.
Second.
And a roll call, please.
Mayor Ellsworth,
Yes.
Councilmember Hardy,
Yes.
Hall,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Doring.
Yes.
Very good. Thank you. Really appreciate everybody's focus on this. Very much appreciate the public comment, the folks on the line letting us know where they're seeing this. This is an issue we are going to all have to be very focused on. And as we know, beyond the air we breathe, it's the water that is the foundation of our lives and all that we do. So this is going to take a community effort and everybody working together. So thank you very much for everybody's input and energy into this. And that message of conservation to be the mindset as we move forward and help spread that word that we can do it if we all work together on the conservation. I'm seeing the city clerk. Did you raise a hand?
Just at the conclusion of the item, if we could just take a moment for me to get in contact with Councilmember Shuto.
Okay, very good.
And just
So
to let you,
please go
Mayor,
ahead.
just to let you know, I'm going to continue my recusal on the next item. As you know, I've represented the applicant in the past. I recused myself. I think we're on 10-2, are we not?
Yep. Okay,
Yeah,
so we'll text.
I'll drop off for a while.
Okay, so we'll just pause for a moment. Do we want to take a 5-minute break and let ourselves get reset?
Yes.
Oh, okay, let's do that. Let's be back in 5 at 7. What do we got here? 53. Mute.
Vice Mayor Doring, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi
Yes.
there. Hey, if you could do me a favor, after the mayor calls for 10.2, if you wouldn't mind going ahead and jumping off the meeting, and then I will text you or call you when you can jump back
Is that
on the meeting.
required? Is that required by law?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Thank you. I'll do that. I'll do it now. Bye.
Hi there. If we could just have 2 more minutes of a break,
Sure.
I will be right back. I'll be right back.
I'll look to you, Cindy, when we're ready.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, we're ready.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate everybody coming back. And we are going to move to item 10.2. This is consideration and proposed approval of the annexation of territory into the St. Helena Municipal Sewer District, number 1 MSD annexation, number 139-2790 Spring Street, St. Helena. And this is prepared by Martine Beltran.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Mayor and City Council members. As part of the sewer annexation process, this item was first brought to Council on March 9th, in which a resolution was adopted ordering tonight's public hearing. Per the Municipal Code sections 13.020, 0.040, and 13.020.070, the property owner is required to annex into the city's municipal sewer district, pay all the annexation, connection, and impact fees prior to building their project. The applicant has completed this step. Additionally, the applicant has submitted a waiver request letter for consideration of waiving the 5-year moratorium as Spring Street was overlaid in 2019. And the letter is included with the staff report as attachment 2. If council approves the attached resolution to allow the property at 2790 Spring Street to be annexed into the city's sewer system following tonight's hearing, city staff will then process the annexation with the county and the state. Along with me today, Paul Warnick from RSA Plus has joined the meeting and is able to share their sewer extension plan if needed, and we're also available for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. I'll bring it back to the council. Are there any initial thoughts or comments before I go to public comments? I'm seeing Councilmember Hardy.
Yes. Mr. Beltran, I'm just wondering if you could explain in a little bit more detail what the consequence is in terms of the pavement on Spring Street.
As far as the type of work that's going to be done on Spring Street?
Well, the effect of the waiver, as I understand it, we have the 5-year rule in place because when the city goes to the expense of repaving a street, we want to keep that in as good condition as we can before we have to do it again. And so in that regard, I'm wondering what the impact of the waiver is in terms of the condition of the street.
Perfect. I don't know if Paul would like to join because he has a better understanding of how that's going to affect this specific project in Spring Street. I know he has spoke with Mayor Ellsworth, and there's a way where it's not going to impact it as much. So I don't know if Paul would like to jump in and provide additional information.
Well, he could answer my question when he if he's not going to present the project otherwise, then I guess now it's fine, actually.
Yes. Can we bring Mr. Warnock in?
Okay, I'm going to allow Mr. Warnock to speak. You should be able to unmute yourself and address the City Council.
Yes, thank you very much, and thank you for having us here tonight. Would it be possible to bring up that plan that we had submitted?
Just one moment. Okay, I'm going to share my screen.
All right, thank you very much. So this provides a context of what we are looking at and what the project entails. So currently the City of St. Helena municipal sewer system ends at a manhole at the corner of Spring Street and Sylvaner Avenue. That's on the right-hand side of your screen there. And what we are proposing is to extend the sewer main 450 lineal feet to the left to Mr. Cartledge's residence. So Mr. Tony Cartledge, who is my client and the project proponent, he has a family member who is going to be returning to live with him at his home. And to support that, he has submitted plans to convert an outbuilding on his property into an accessory dwelling unit. And his home is currently within the City of St. Helena Municipal Sewer District sphere of influence, although it is currently served by an on-site septic system. So in order to have this accessory dwelling unit approved for his family member to come and live with him, it is required under the municipal code for them to connect that new ADU and likewise the residents on the parcel to the municipal sewer district. So the way that the code reads is that the sewer main would be extended from the location on Sylvaner Avenue to the far end on the left, at the left side of your screen of his parcel. And given that we are still within the prohibition period, we've done several things to try and limit that pavement disruption. So first of all, we are planning to, rather than extend the sewer main all the way to the far left side of his parcel, we are planning to stop the sewer main at the right-hand side of his parcel, which would end up saving 200 lineal feet of pavement disruption that we would not be imposing. Now, at that point, we would route the sewer line through the parcel to his residence and to his guest house. Generally speaking, the reason why that sewer main would extend to the far end of his parcel would be to facilitate future connections further down the road. But in this case, Mr. Cartledge's property is the last parcel on Spring Street that is within the sphere of influence for the municipal sewer district, and it would not serve any reasonable purpose to extend that further than is needed for this project. The second thing that we are doing to limit the trenching in the street is, rather than extending the sanitary sewer line down the middle of the street through the paved area, we are looking at keeping that within the right of way, but offsetting it into the gravel shoulder of the street. So if you look on the right-hand side of the screen, there is a concrete sidewalk, curb and gutter along that first corner parcel at Sylvaner Avenue. But after that, the sidewalk ends and it continues on as a gravel shoulder. So we would be installing the sanitary sewer in that gravel shoulder rather than under the paved area of the street. The third thing that we're planning to do to reduce the impact to the street is, for that last segment along that that sidewalk area, is we are looking at using a horizontal directional drilling to install that, rather than trench all the way from Sylvaner Avenue to the end of the sidewalk. So what that will require is two pits, one drilling pit and one receiving pit at the manhole, which would then end up being paved from the curb to the center line of the road per the municipal standards. So based on these three strategies that we are having, we are essentially taking a 650 lineal foot potential trench in Spring Street and replacing that with less than 100 lineal feet of trenching in Spring Street to provide the sanitary sewer connection for Mr. Cartledge's ADU. Mr. Hardy, did that answer your question?
Yes, quite well. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there additional council questions? I had similar concerns regarding going into fairly freshly paved area, but after seeing the area and the plan, was assured that it minimizes the disruption as much as possible. I'm seeing Mr. Wenger.
Yes, Mr. Mayor and council members, I've dealt with this quite a bit, and there is a real impact with trenching in asphalt streets, particularly brand new streets where we've done paving. And one of the approaches that I can tell you we can take is we can evaluate what the applicant is proposing. And I apologize, I have not seen those improvement plans yet, but generally, if an applicant has to excavate in a brand new street, the extent of paving patches that are required are much more extensive than a typical trench repair. And the reason why that is you want the paving to act as one large piece as opposed to a thin, just a trench cut. So we can work with the applicant, but I can tell you that my recommendation during the improvement plan review is going to be probably a more extensive paving repair where they're impacting brand new paving. For instance, at that manhole, if they're having to dig a bore pit or a pit to insert the pipe in, it may well involve repaving of half the street right at that intersection. So it could be a much larger patch, but I have the same concerns that the council's expressed, and I've dealt with this a lot in a lot of communities. So I will be reviewing that and making sure that we get a product in the end that is not going to compromise our new paving.
Thank you. So you believe that approached correctly, this will have the structural integrity that we expect.
Yes, I can ensure that, but I'll work with Martine and we'll make sure, and the applicant, we're not going to be completely unreasonable, but people have to understand when they excavate in brand new paving, it's going to require more than a typical trench repair to make sure that we don't end up with something substandard to brand new paving. So, yes.
Thank you. Very good. I'm going to open it up to public comment. If there are no council comments at this point, I'll look to our city clerk.
I am not seeing any hands raised. No public comment, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, so we'll bring it back to the council, and we'll see. I'm looking that what is needed here is direction. So we don't need to make a motion, I understand, but we want to see public or council direction for moving forward on this, and consensus on that. I'm seeing our city clerk.
Mr. Mayor, there is actually action.
Oh, I'm sorry. Am I looking at the wrong number here?
I do need we would need a motion to proceed.
Okay, so is there a motion on this item?
Yes, I'll move that we adopt a resolution approving the annexation of territory into the St. Helena Municipal Sewer District number 1 MSD annexation number 139.
I second.
And roll call, please.
Councilmember Hardy,
Yes.
Paul,
Yes.
Chateau,
Yes.
Mayor Ellsworth.
Yes. Very good. Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Oh.
And at the conclusion of this item, I will, if you would just give me a moment, to reach out to Vice Mayor Doreen to rejoin the meeting.
Very good. Thank you. So we'll pause for a moment as Cindy does that, and get ready to move on to item 12.1.
All right, Vice Mayor Doring will be rejoining us, so if we could just wait a moment.
I'm seeing Vice Mayor Doring is now on, so we're here and we can now move on. We'll move on to item 12.1. This is consideration and proposed approval of a resolution appointing John Zimmerman to the Active Transportation and Sustainability Committee, the ATSC, and keeping the recruitment open until vacant seats have been filled. And this is Cindy Shafopoulos, our city clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members. We did receive a application from Mr. John Zimmerman, a community member that would love to join the ATSC. So we have one regular spot remaining that with a term expiring June 30th, 2021, and we do have 2 alternate seats that are available. So if you have any questions, Mr. Zimmerman was invited to attend the council meeting this evening. He may have had other prior commitments. I'm not sure if he's on the line if you have any questions for him. If you have any questions for me, I'm here to answer.
Okay, very good. Any initial council comments or questions? And are we not seeing Mr. Zimmerman on the line?
I am not seeing Mr. Zimmerman, and I'm not seeing a hand raised, so I don't believe he was able to attend this evening.
Okay, so so with that, is there any additional other public comment that you're seeing?
I'm seeing no other hands raised, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, are there any comments or questions from council on this application? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve, to adopt a resolution appointing Mr. Zimmerman to the Active Transportation and Sustainability Committee?
So moved.
And a second.
Second.
And we'll do a roll call, please.
Councilmember Chateau,
Yes.
Hall,
Yes.
Hardy,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Doring,
Yes. I assume
Mayor
that our
Ellsworth.
process is correct, and that we're not required to have a nomination by the mayor. I'll let him vote, but
Oh, let me make sure.
actually that would be actually that would be the
That is the
would
process. Thank
be
you, Mr.
the proper process.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Mr. Vice Mayor. I will make a nomination of Mr. Zimmerman for the Active Transportation Sustainability Committee.
second.
And a roll call, please.
Mayor Ellsworth,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Doring,
Yes.
Councilor Chateau,
Yes.
Hardy,
Yes.
Hall.
Yes.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Okay, now we're going to move on to item 12.2.
Mr. Mayor, before we move on, I will recuse myself from the next item, just to be thoroughly safe and clear. There is no financial interest here, but it is a topic that obviously has been raised earlier and this evening. So City Clerk, if you don't mind, I will leave the meeting, and if you could text me or call me when you're ready.
Thank you.
And Mayor, just to be clear for the record, so the city clerk can note it. Councilmember Hall was recusing himself based on his wife's employment with UVDS and Clover Flat landfill under both the Political Reform Act and as I indicated in the memo to you that I sent out yesterday. There's been concerns raised that I'm sure we'll discuss tonight about there being a potential government code section 1090 conflict. I advise the council that my belief is that there likely is not a conflict, but if there was in this situation, there is not a conflict. But if there was, it would his interest, Councilmember Hall's interest would only be a remote interest, which also allows him to recuse himself under the under government code section 1090. So I just wanted to make sure that was in the record.
Thank you. And as we get into this, what I had looked at in talking with the county, recognizing that I had originally understood there was an April 15th deadline on getting this moved forward, finding that was not necessarily the case. As much as I respect Mr. Walsh's opinion, I do have still some questions about the 1090 issue, which I put into an inquiry to the FPPC today. And I just want to have us consider the idea that if there's not a deadline on this, to perhaps wait for the FPPC to come back. I believe they have 21 days. So I just want to make sure that that's on the record as well, that that I put in an inquiry just to satisfy myself with some of the concerns that I had. So with that, this is the consideration and proposed approval of a resolution authorizing the Fifth Amendment to the Napa County Agreement number 3265, the Upper Valley Waste Management Agency Joint Powers Authority Agreement. And I believe Ms. Nixon, our assistant to the city manager, is going to lead us into this.
Yes, good evening, Mayor and City Council. Thank you. So what I've done is I presented the information regarding the amendments to the JPA in the staff report. And we have Mr. Steve Lederer, who is the agency manager, here to answer any questions. So with that, we will take any questions. So thank you.
Thank you. And I want to just sort of check in with the city manager and the other council members. I have some comments related to what we'd say some of the environmental and impacts, water impacts, et cetera. I know that there are some community members as well. Will there be an objection from the council members or the city attorney if folks speak on these issues related to the JPA, which has certain oversight authority? I just want to check with the council to see where their comfort level is with the discussion. I'm seeing Councilmember Hardy.
Yes, I'm not sure what you're anticipating, Mayor Ellsworth, but I am concerned that having directed, well, I guess I'm a little bit confused at this point. What was the decision we made during the public forum on comments regarding the environmental issues? I thought we heard them then.
I think there's a bit of confusion that there's more folks on the line, and I certainly have comment regarding the environmental issues tied to the oversight or you know, that sort of part of this. I feel that it's appropriate to have the comments tie in, but I want to talk about it a little bit to make sure if we get into the discussion, it's an open discussion. I'm trying to, in a sense, from my perspective, make the point that this body has oversight capabilities that perhaps were not fully exercised, and this I believe is the appropriate spot to talk about what the impacts of perhaps some of that oversight failure. What are the impacts of that? And as we look at continuing a relationship with a company, what are we looking at? I feel the community, certainly those outside of city limits in the southern, south in the Whitehall area, have really not had an opportunity to voice their issues about how the JPA operates with this company in respect to their properties and certainly within the city as well.
Well, thank you. That clarifies it. I suppose my only concern really was that we not set ourselves up for a situation where the same speakers were delivering the same comments we'd already heard. But I suspect I needn't worry about that.
Mayor, I did want to interject just so on two things. One is, the Brown Act requires that we consider public comments on the item that is before us for whatever, if we're making a decision on an item, we consider comments that are on the item that is before us at the time. Ultimately, you run the meeting, and so it's kind of your prerogative to decide what you think is within the scope of that and what is not, as the chair of the meeting. So it's not my place to tell you where to draw those lines necessarily. But I do think that I know Prey asked for questions, but I do think we would benefit from a summary from Mr. Lederer on what it is that we're acting on tonight, because I do feel like there's some confusion here. The item that we are acting on is an amendment to the JPA agreement that would do two things. It would adjust the mechanism by which they calculate the franchise fees, and secondly, it specifies certain authority that they would have to implement SB 1383 and some other state laws regarding diversion of organic waste. And so that's specifically what's before us. We're not considering the franchise agreement. We're not a party to the franchise agreement. We're not ratifying the franchise agreement, nor are we doing anything directly related to UVDS or Clover Flat landfill. So I think the discussion would benefit from some clarity on that point, and it's probably best if Mr. Lederer provide that rather than me, because I'm basing it on what I saw in the staff report and the legal documents, but he has more background on this issue.
Thank you, and I'll pass it to Mr. Lederer in just a moment. My concern in discussing an agreement with the JPA is that since there's never been any competitive bidding for these services, that an agreement with the JPA is by default an agreement with Upper Valley Disposal Clover Flat landfill. And so that's sort of where I'm trying to get into the root of this relationship with our city and this entity, and how we ensure best practice, et cetera, so that when we're having discussions about moving forward, getting into contracts or agreements, that we're sure of what we're getting, and able to talk about perhaps what has not worked in the past, and looking for ways to get things to work better for really the whole community. So I'll pass it to Mr. Lederer, but that's sort of, I'm seeing Councilmember Chateau with a hand, and then I'll go to Mr. Lederer.
I was just, when you frame it that way, thank you, Mayor Ellsworth, that to me sounds like that's a totally separate agenda item than what we have in front of us. And perhaps that'll be clarified after we hear from Mr. Lederer more.
Thank you.
Also an issue to me that seems like that we would take up and all of the comments back at the JPA at those meetings where we are a member, and I sit on that as representing St. Helena, and we had representation before.
Would you then support agendizing a discussion about the sort of the impacts, the issues with the lack of competitive bidding, et cetera? Would you support agendizing that discussion?
I'd want to know, because we just had that with a special meeting. That's exactly what we just took 3 hours to do.
The special meeting was,
I don't know if that's the exact time, but that's, I didn't mean to.
Let's put it to Mr. Lederer here and see where we are.
Okay, my turn?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Ellsworth, members of the council. I've come and addressed St. Helena on many issues over the years, and happy to do so again, hopefully in person at some point relatively soon. So the item on your agenda today is an amendment, the fifth amendment to the Joint Powers Authority, or Joint Powers Agency, JPA, Upper Valley Waste Management Agency. The fifth amendment does three things. One is that it formalizes how franchise fees, once they're collected by the agency, are distributed to the different members. For the benefit of the public, there are 4 members who make up the JPA. St. Helena, of course, is one. The town of Yountville, the city of Calistoga, and the unincorporated county are each of the members. The way the UVA board has determined to divide up the franchise fees is consistent actually with how it's done in the past, which is that it's a percentage of the revenue that each of the members generate. So the franchise fee that comes to St. Helena is essentially a percentage of the payments that your ratepayers are paying. There are different ways of doing it, but this is the way the board has always done it. And the board felt it was appropriate to codify that in this amendment. So that's a continuation of practice, but being codified. The second thing that this amendment does is it allows the JPA to act for the members and work with the members in implementing the requirements of SB 1383, the organics diversion law. There are many, many portions of 1383 which will probably be done best at more of a regional level. Things like food collection and distribution, education programs, things along those lines. The UVA board felt, and certainly in talking with the city managers, that the more things that could be done at a regional level and not be left to the individual cities, the best benefit there that would be. A JPA can only do what the JPA agreement says the JPA can do, and this is not currently in the agreement. So absent making this change for 1383, essentially each of the members would be on their own for implementing 1383. The third element of this change is, again, something that's more of a boot and suspenders. It's something that the UVA board has the ability to do, but we felt it was best to codify it in the agreement. Is simply to specify that the funding for to run the agency comes from fees through the UVDS franchise. In the past, those fees were collected out of the Clover Flat franchise, but for a lot of sort of organizational, operational reasons, the board felt it was more appropriate to run those fees through the UVDS contract. Our attorney, I said the UVA's attorney, again, felt that our board already had the authority to do that, but felt for clarity purposes, it made sense to have it in the agreement. So essentially it's those three elements. It's how franchise fees are distributed, coordination of 1383, and how the agency is funded. Since you've already talked about it and I've seen this written in a number of different places, I'll just address, I saw it was written that this agreement extends the franchise agreements. That's not true. I've seen it written that this agreement somehow changes the franchise agreements. That's not true. I've seen it written that this somehow changes how UVDS or Clover Flat would operate. That's not true. I've seen it written that UVDS is somehow part of this agreement. That's not true. It was mentioned earlier that this agreement has something to do with the relationship with the company. That's not true. Mr. Ellsworth mentioned earlier, Mayor Ellsworth, I'm sorry, we did talk earlier. It is correct that there is no particular due date on this. April 15th, I heard that date. I don't know where that came from. That's not a specific due date. But as I said, I'll point out that if you don't adopt this, probably the biggest impact is the 1383 piece. Basically, all the members having to do that individually. Distribution of the franchise fees, the UVA board, I don't want to presuppose what my board would do, but the UVA board could take that up individually and make their own decisions on that. But we did believe it made sense to have it in this agreement. But the UVA board could deal with that separately. And again, the agency funding the UVA board could deal with separately if it chose to. But without this agreement, the members are left hanging on how to implement SB 1383. So those are the importance. I will say there is a due date in the sense that July 1st, we go into the new year. These things need to be implemented by then. And obviously we need a little time before July 1st. So April 15th is not a hard date, but we certainly would appreciate a decision in the relatively near future so we know how to plan going forward. That's all I have, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. I appreciate that. this is my thought here, is that ever since, and this is a very challenging issue, and I know it's charged, and but I want to work through a little bit and see if there's some logic here in talking about 1383, talking about how we're going to manage that, and what I feel is that a conversation about the company's history is relevant to this. And I recognize maybe there's some folks that feel that that's not relevant. As I've tried to bring this issue forward for the last really year and a half, every meeting I go to, I'm told this is not the right meeting to discuss these issues. And so I want to make sure that I can discuss them and that the community can discuss them and our concerns. And so my feeling is I would like to speak openly about my concerns because I think it does tie to any agreement we make, and particularly if we're talking about food waste and 1383, how we're going to manage that. And I would like to be able to open it to the public to also put their concerns in, who are those impacted by how this refuse or this compost or this material is managed. So that is my feeling. If there is a protest or somebody disagrees with that, I understand that somebody may lodge that protest, but I would like to allow the comment and then accept if somebody would like to protest me allowing that. But I'm planning at this point to go forward, making my comments, opening it to the public, and then seeing what that looks like. So that's my plan, and I'll just move forward here with some comments and then open it up. Mr. Lederer.
Yes, I'm just going to ask, and I'm sorry, Mayor, I know it's your meeting, but I was just going to ask if anyone had any questions for me, because if you don't, then I was going to check out.
Certainly. So I'll go to the council and see if there are any questions for Mr. Lederer before we move forward. I'm seeing Mr. Doring, Councilmember Doring.
Thank you, Mr. Lederer, for your presentation and for being here tonight. Just one question on the authority with respect to the fees. As I understand it, the prior authority was to pass on fees in order to fund the agency. And those fees would come from the tipping fees. But the fees now, as proposed, would change slightly. I think, as I understand it, there would be also authority to pass on fees to the members and to the members' residents or businesses to implement the 1383 program. Is my understanding correct? And do we have an idea of what those fees would entail in terms of magnitude?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Member Doring. Yeah. So you're talking about two separate fees. One is a franchise fee, which is essentially a percentage of total revenue, which is collected by the company and then passed through the agency to each of the members. So it's a phased-in fee the first year. I'll just mention Calistoga has been doing this for many, many years. It's new to St. Helena, but it's not new to the agency because Calistoga has been doing this. So the first year's franchise fee is 2.5% of revenue. The second year it jumps to 6% of revenue, and the third year it goes to 10% of revenue, which is where it stays. So that money is passed, as I said, from the ratepayer through the agency to you as a member. You as the member then can do essentially anything you feel is appropriate with that money that's somehow tied to the waste management mission. You can use it to help implement 1383. You can use it, it's already been well documented that garbage trucks damage roads. You could use a certain amount of it for road repair. You could hire staff to do waste management programs. So that's one fee. That's the percentage fee. The other fee you're talking about, which is funding the agency, in the past, you're correct, we used to collect $4.75 for every ton that was dumped in Clover Flat. and we use that money to fund the agency, which is essentially the 3% of my salary that when I'm not working for the county in public works, and I'm working for UVA. So you pay a little bit of my salary. Amanda Griffin, who's our kind of our full-time recycling person, who runs basically all of the education programs for waste management up Valley. So you pay for staff and our insurance, and you pay for, we buy recycling containers that we give to people. They're all the different things that the agency does. The problem with doing it through the per ton fee was we were sort of at the mercy of the market. So in a down year where there were fewer tons, we got less money, we had trouble doing programs. And then there were good years where we had extra money. So rather than trying to run what is essentially a flat budget on an up and down revenue stream, it made more sense to just pick a number, build it into the UVDS side, and then we would know exactly what revenue we were getting for the agency, and we could operate it accordingly. So those are the two different fees you're talking about. I'm sorry, does that answer your question?
I was just wondering would there be additional fees to the ratepayers to manage the 1383 program? The way it's stated, as I read it somewhere, it said or, it said tipping fees or other surcharges. And I was wondering if one's going to replace the tipping fees or is going to be in addition to it, and whether it would be an increase in fees beyond prior experience. I think that's the point I'm trying to make.
Okay, yeah, we did leave our options open, but the decision the board has already made is we have eliminated the tipping fee and are only using the UVDS fee. I will say going forward, because we haven't worked out all of the details of 1383, that's something that's going to happen over the next 1, 2, 3 years. There could be additional impacts on the rates. But it just depends on what the requirements of 1383 end up being, and frankly, how well we organize and cooperate to implement in the most efficient way possible.
Thank you.
Thank you. If there are no more council comments or questions, Mr. Lederer, I don't know if you're available to stay if I opened it a public comment just to hear some of the public concerns. Are you available to stay for a few minutes to hear?
I can stay for a little bit. Honestly, I'm not sure that I'll make it to the end, but I can hang on for a little bit. I have a couple other commitments that I jumped out of in order to do this, so I apologize.
Okay, very good. So we'll see if there are some public comments at this point.
I'm seeing some public comment, Mr. Mayor. Mr. White, I'm going to allow you to speak. You can unmute yourself and address the City Council, and you will have 4 minutes to speak.
Thank you. Can you hear me fine now?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Amos White. I live in Alameda, California. I sit on Alameda's Environmental Task Force, CASA, Community Action for a Sustainable Alameda. I co-authored our climate emergency declaration that we passed in March of 2019, and I currently am vice chair of the Climate Emergency Mobilization Task Force here in the Bay Area. I come tonight to speak to you as a private citizen who has an extreme interest in the environmental activism and interest on behalf of the public that I have seen exhibited by Mayor Ellsworth, particularly in two cases, one being the redwoods that are being established there, but then particularly also in regards to Clover Flat and the UVDS. I think that in this case, the factors and logic in regards to the oversight or inadequate oversight of this landfill, that I would support the motion that the mayor's put forward in regards to the closure of this. particularly due to the unnecessary risk to the health and public safety of the community there, as well as the risk to the broader Napa Valley, Napa County region as well, and that you have. So with such, I just wanted to address this issue and lend my support in that direction. So thank you.
Thank you for the public comment. Is there additional public comment?
There is, Mr. Mayor, and Ms. Sandy, you are allowed to address the council. You have 4 minutes to speak.
Thank you, Council, and thank you for the very efficient vaccination center at Napa College, St. Helena. Both John and I are very grateful for that. As a Napa County taxpayer and a Whitehall neighborhood resident, I'm stunned that neither Clover Flat landfill or UDVS have been subjected by the county to a competitive bidding process. Yet in 2001, we began another vulnerable Napa Valley fire season. Both homeowners and businesses are subjected to economic and emotional capital to mitigate fire risk. Yet in our midst, we have two facilities who may heighten the risk that we all face. And yet we do not have the benefit to understand any alternatives. I ask 3 things. Please do not enter into any arrangement to amend any agreement with either UVDS or Clover Flat landfill. Secondly, ask for a competitive bidding process that is fair and offered to many providers who do waste services for our neighboring municipalities. Third, request that the city attorney do an analysis of costs associated with unwinding from the current Joint Powers Authority. Let the residents of the municipality weigh in on the options going forward. This current arrangement needs the scrutiny and sunshine of a more transparent process. Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to comment.
Thank you. Is there additional public comment?
There is, Mr. Mayor. Leslie, I'm going to allow you to speak and you can address the council. You may unmute yourself and address them, and you'll have 4 minutes.
Great, thank you. I would like to voice my opposition to this amendment for food waste. Or could it be agendized? We have heard many different variations of this going to Clover Flats or to Whitehall. The blending barn is completely enclosed, and it's not. Nothing about entertaining an RFP for managing food waste elsewhere. It makes no sense to continue to feed a company that cannot scale to economy. The compost piles can't get much bigger than what they are now. The concerns of fire hazard in both locations, continuing disregard of complaints with no real solutions, and misinformation continues unabated. And now bullying, as heard by the UVDS owner in asking for Mayor Ellsworth's resignation. Expansion of waste collection and other government-driven initiatives should be looked at through new and fresh eyes, considering other possibilities rather than the status quo. Thank you.
Thank you. Additional comment? And
There is additional public comment. Matt and Cami Smith, I will allow you to speak. You can unmute yourself and address the city council. You'll have 4 minutes.
Hi, this is Cami Smith. I would like to say we firmly believe that the city should absolutely not agree to comply in any matter to an updated franchise agreement with Clover Flat or UVDS. This is why there has never been an RFP, to our knowledge at least, for the waste handling in our community. So the question is, why the exclusivity? We believe this community deserves and needs to know the truth about the exposure at Clover Flat landfill before any such decision can possibly be made. How can there never have been a competitive bid allowed? This needs to be accomplished as a mandatory service to our community at the very least. Secondly, we strongly believe that there should be a third-party audit of the entire permitting and development of UBDS to reassure the community that all compliance regulations have been met, complied to, and that the resolutions of our concerns as a community are accomplished. This is in direct relation to the numerous homeowners' complaints to not only sound, odor, light, pestilence, and massive growing compost issues. These are just a few of the issues that have not been met. So how are you going to manage 1383? How are you going to manage food waste? We love our home in St. Helena, our community. We believe it is the council's duty to enforce the appropriate checks and balances to ensure our safety and well-being. And lastly, we firmly believe that it is a major conflict of interest for Eric Hall to sit as a St. Helena City Council member, as he is related to the family that owns Upper Valley Waste Management, that serves to benefit from all residents and businesses in the Up Valley area, since they have a monopoly on Up Valley refuse management. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Is there additional public comment?
There is, Mr. Mayor. Chris, I'm going to allow you to speak. You can unmute yourself and you have 4 minutes to address the council.
I do want to mention, if that's Chris Malin, that she did make comment earlier on the environmental aspects of this. So that may be where her comment is taken. Chris, are you hearing me? Can you hear me?
I hear you, but what are you saying to me?
That there was some confusion at the beginning of the meeting as to where this comment would go. And since you made the environmental comment earlier, we can take it from there so that in a sense, you're not able to comment twice on the same issue, if that's understandable. And perhaps if you wanted to send something written in for.
No, what
okay.
I'm going to say is in addition to what I already said.
So, but I think that it's just a time issue that then you would have an extra block of time that wouldn't.
I'm not going to repeat.
I know, but it's just the fact that it's a time thing. So could I, Ethan, what do you think on?
Well, I just sat through hours and hours to get to this, so I'd appreciate it if you'd let me speak.
I just
I don't
feel like
understand what you're doing, so I don't understand.
Mayor, Ms. Malin spoke in public comment on general items, so I think she can speak on this item.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
Okay, thank you
Chris,
for helping me understand more clarity on this. So yes, I don't see how you can separate your fiduciary responsibilities in approving this this financial arrangement from really understanding what approving the money does, which is to provide ongoing revenues to keep this business going when this is an unsustainable business. And I think that's the elephant in the room, is that this is an unsustainable business. You can't call this sustainable if you're trucking your leachate to Santa Rosa. Did you know that? All that pollution fluid that comes off of that site gets trucked to Santa Rosa, to a facility that can manage the high levels of pollutants in it, because it's not allowed to go into the river or into the streams. So in 2019, when we had a lot of rain, this site could not manage the amount of leachate coming out of the unlined portions of the dump. And their containers got full, and they deliberately opened spigot and let the leachate go into the river. So in their wastewater discharge requirement permit with the State Water Board, they are required to have infrastructure that meets the 100-year storm event. 2019 was not a 100-year storm event for 28 hours. It was not. So therefore, the whole facility has already failed in a storm events under a 100-year storm event. So the amount of fluid, the amount of leachate, otherwise known as dump juice, cannot sustainably be managed. The other thing is if you read the wastewater discharge requirement, there's a section in there that speaks about groundwater regulations and the public trust use of groundwater. And the water board describes that the site, the alluvium and the fractured rock is shallow. So the groundwater is close to the surface and is not an ideal site for anybody to be using it for public trust uses, such as water for the citizens of the city of St. Helena. And I know your wells are below the site of the Clover Flat landfill. So that pollution plume that's coming off of that landfill is going downstream, and you guys are pumping it through your wells and getting that into your city water. And the water board warned of that in the wastewater discharge requirement, that it's not advisable to have wells below or near this site. And I can send that to you. I just read it. It's right in there. So pollution plumes take many, many years before they reach the river. So the 2019 plume could take years and years before all the full effects reach the pollution events reach, noticeable limits.
Thank you, Ms. Malin. And we'll move now to additional public comment.
Mr. Perez, I'm going to allow you to speak. You can unmute yourself. You have 4 minutes to address the council.
Yes, actually what I have to say is relatively short, and that I think it's important to listen to the previous speakers and the points that they brought up. They're extremely important in regards to what you're considering in regards to the contracts with Clover Flat. And again, we've had a very dry year this year, which is unusual. And I think under normal circumstances in regards to rainfall, there was likely to be additional considerations and concerns in regards to the runoffs and other effluents that are coming out of Clover Flat. I think it's important that you give yourselves time in regards to considering the contract that's up for renewal, and that it's going to be extremely important with time, considering our overall environment within our county, that you take your time and don't rush into a long-term contract again in regards to the debris and things that are taken up to Clover Flats. So again, I emphasize that it's important to take your time. Don't rush into something that you may be sorry for after a year's worth of time and getting back into a normal cycle in regards to rainfall. And again, I appreciate the opportunity to speak before the council, and I look forward to seeing what your decision is. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe we have additional public comments. Cindy, do we want to extend the meeting at this point and see if there's a motion to extend the meeting?
Please.
Is there a motion from the council to extend the meeting? I'll make the motion to extend the meeting for half an hour.
I'll second that.
And a roll
Mayor
call, please.
Ellsworth?
Yes.
Councilor Hardy?
Yes.
Chateau?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Doring?
Yes.
Okay, very good.
All right, we have additional public comment Frank Leeds. I'm going to allow you to speak. You have 4 minutes to address the council. You may unmute yourself.
Hello, my name is Frank Leeds. Our family and the Bastoni family have both purchased adjacent parcels in Rutherford during the 1920s, close to 100 years ago. In the past 30 years, the Bastonis have developed an enormous composting and recycling operation in the middle of the ag preserve. The noise and smell at times are just terrible and really do infringe on our quality of life and our ability to enjoy our property. With the exception of Mayor Ellsworth, the county has turned a deaf ear on the neighbors' concerns, despite well-attended meetings where we have pleaded for changes. Therefore, I would like to second Cammie and Matt Smith's request that, number one, the county use a competitive bid process for waste management and recycling, and number two, a third-party audit is done of the entire permitting and development of UVDS. Thank you.
Thank you. And is there additional public comment?
There is. Does a gentleman? Oh, I have one. The gentleman's name is Matt. I will allow you to speak and you can address the city council after you unmute yourself. You have 4 minutes.
All right, thank you very much. Mayor, Councilman, thank you for the time. And I would just say that we have a few issues at hand, right? We have the permitting process, and we've got in the middle of the best real estate, right, in the world, we have allowed something to happen here. So I think we need to look at two things. Look at a third-party audit, and we also look at, reassessing where we're at today. I think Napa Valley is a very special place, and that putting this cesspool in the middle of one of the best real estate properties in the entire world is a big mistake. So, as Frank said, I think we need two things. We need an audit, and we need an RFP process that makes sense, right, to the community, to the entire community, so that we can bring the best product and continue to perpetuate what Napa Valley is. All right. Thank you, Mayor, council members. Appreciate it.
Thank you. And additional comment?
All right, I'm seeing additional comment by Beth Leeds. I'm going to allow you to speak. You can unmute yourself and address the council. You have 4 minutes to speak.
I believe she may be muted.
She is muted, and she has the capability of unmuting herself, and she can address the council. And I have asked her to mute herself.
Is there additional comment that we can circle back to her?
There is no other public comment at this time, and I've asked her to unmute herself a few times.
Okay. We can bring it back to the council, and if she calls back in, we can reopen the public comment. I don't know if she's talking at this point. So with that, I'll bring it back up to the council. I want to make some comments. I know there probably are some comments. I'll begin by saying that I know how difficult this subject is, and what I'm trying to get to is looking past perhaps some of the bureaucratic or political veils and get into some physical realities of this situation. And the realities that our physical environment, that where we raise families, where we create a product that is world renowned based on water, clean water. And we have a number of facilities that came into being here in the early 1960s, before the resurgence of the wine industry, before the Napa County was tied into the Bay Area and Bay Area housing prices, before the real value of Napa County really rose. These facilities went into place. And I want to recognize that the owners of this company are remarkable community members and have been here for a long time, providing many benefits to the community. And I don't want to disparage that. But the reality of these physical locations compromises everybody else's investment here by the risk to our water quality, by the locations where water flows through, and catastrophic events can happen when there are alternatives. There are other companies that provide alternatives. This was something that our community was never really told about. And I was recently chastised a bit for talking to other companies, not to seek a bid, but to find out what was available to us. What are the best options for the future? We know that there are companies that have a larger economy of scale that can operate these operations in places that are less environmentally sensitive or sensitive to a community. We have never asked those questions because this has never been open to bid, and it has never been open to other companies coming in and showing us better ways. That's why we have competitive bidding, particularly with government services. We were told that there's no value to having contracts here or doing the service here, that no other company would be interested. Well, what I found out is that larger companies do service smaller areas. All up and down the coast, smaller communities use services that actually take the waste as far as places like the Lockwood landfill near Reno. And the vehicle miles traveled are offset by the economies of scale of how they manage their waste streams, shooting for zero waste. And so there are ways to do this. And if we're looking at our climate window of 9 years, we've got to do everything we can. And I believe we can't just look at history or the tradition or the status quo of what we've always done. We have to open our eyes to the fact that we need to look at changes. And that most likely will involve competitive bidding. And that's what has not existed here. And so it brings up the concerns of monopoly, that decisions made only and by default benefit one company that's never been questioned in 60 years about their practices. In the last review period that has come up, and since that period, let me just read. This is what's occurred. Some of the things. There was an employee death. There were numerous lawsuits, including a lawsuit with the city of St. Helena. Unregulated radioactive waste stored at the facility for nearly a year, and that's under the new management. A chemical explosion before that in 2019, I believe, that hospitalized a worker. Dozens of fires, contamination of the Napa River that directly irrigates our Napa Valley, many of our Napa Valley grape vineyards. We don't have to keep going down this path. There are alternatives that I believe we need to explore. And what I'm trying to say is that both of these facilities bring a fire risk because waste becomes fuel with heat and pressure. And so we're putting a fire risk into the middle of our valley and in a high fire tier area on the north side when we don't have to do that. We don't have to take that chance. We don't have to take the chance there'll be a catastrophic leachate failure as there was when the Napa River was closed for over a month or roughly a month. That's the river that serves our community, both in terms of feeding our aquifers and supporting our grapes. We don't have to do that. I've tried for a year and a half to have a reasonable conversation at every board that I could get to, and I keep getting shut down and trying to have a conversation that I believe is rooted in logic. We don't have to have the fire risk. We don't have to have the risk to our water. And there's also the aspects of community or employee health and safety. If we're working and taking in competitive bids, we may see a company that can provide all these things. There's concerns. I put together a packet that had some information from the EPA. And if we compare what the EPA's recommendations are, there are many areas where what we have here is not really moving in that direction. And so if we look at how do we protect the employees, how do we protect the community, I believe we need to open this up to third-party bidding and recognize that a lack of competitive bidding has led to a breakdown in oversight. And if we look to the future, one of the things that was mentioned at the March 15th meeting was that there's not much change in the Upper Valley. Well, frankly, Upper Valley has been approving in Calistoga and St. Helena new hotels. There are many new winery developments. We've got RENA numbers for many homes that are coming. All those are going to produce more waste. And we're sending it up to the top of our water resource area. And I'm trying to make an analogy saying it's as if Disneyland decided for the next 25 years, they're going to take all the waste and keep it in the park. And we need to rethink this because we have an opportunity to move into the future. And I don't want to be punitive or I don't want to make anybody feel like we can't find a good optimistic solution here, but we have to rethink this because we're going to contaminate our own living area. Our indigenous tribes knew instinctively, intuitively, they didn't need an expert to tell them, you don't put your waste upriver from where you live. We live in the Napa Valley, in Napa County, some of the most remarkable land in the world. And yet we're not thinking about where we're putting our waste. And I think we need to rethink that. And I'm going to wrap up here in just a moment. But I think that the aspects of competitive bidding, opening this up, we know also that there are some inherent conflicts that can occur when somebody's both the hauler and the landfill operator, that there may not be enough incentives for best practice. So all these aspects, I think we can look at. I'd like to look at it in a way of all working together and say, let's open our eyes to a better solution. And if there are companies out there that can offer an economy of scale, we can just say for the climate, for our climate issues, let's do everything we can, step away from older models that might not work and move into the future. So that's what I'm asking us to consider is bringing in a third-party audit and competitive bidding. And I'd like this meeting hopefully to lead to that. So I will leave it at that. If there are other comments from the council. And then I did want to see, Cindy, if the commenter was back on. I wasn't sure if the public comment had come back on.
No, Mr. Mayor.
So are there any comments from the council at this point? Councilmember Hardy. I believe you're muted, Councilmember Hardy.
I did forget. I'm sorry. Thank you. Well, for me, there is still the challenge of getting from what's on our agenda for consideration to the proposals that have been made. And there are additional challenges as well. So I'm going to present a somewhat different organization of concerns and ideas that maybe will help move the conversation forward. I'm hearing two different sets of concerns, and I think they have, two different pathways as a practical matter. And when I hear so much really deeply felt comments about problems that are impacting people's quality of life, my first reaction is to think, well, how does one solve that problem? How can it be addressed? Okay, so I'm organizing things with that mode of thought in mind, and in this regard, for me, the concerns about operations at Upper Valley Disposal are very different from the concerns about operations at Clover Flat. And the reason is that the operations at Upper Valley Disposal, although not exclusively regulated by Napa County, are to a great extent. Most of the concerns that I've heard having to do with noise and odors from the compost and things of this sort come pretty squarely within the scope of the use permit there, and that is, that's a matter over which the Board of Supervisors has direct authority and responsibility, and we have none. And which means that we're one of the least effective places for people to go. And so I say that knowing full well that the fact that these comments have come before us, that this discussion is being held, reflects years of frustration on the part of the residents of Whitehall Lane. And I've heard you, Mayor Ellsworth, express a similar frustration in terms of your efforts to bring these issues forward. But there isn't anything we can do as a city that changes that reality. There's nothing we can do as a city that alters the fact that Upper Valley Disposal is located in an unregulated area of Napa County where land use regulation is the responsibility of the Napa County Board of Supervisors. We can, if we choose, address our own comments to the board on these issues. But again, we have no authority. So that's one real conundrum for me as a council member. Everything I've heard suggests to me that the conditions of life for many of the residents in the vicinity of Upper Valley Disposal have reached a point that they consider intolerable or close to intolerable. And they're not getting the kind of responses from the county that would lead to any sort of solution. And there may be concerns in terms of the county's own authority to the extent that the complaints arise out of operations that are permitted by the current use permit. But I just don't see a way for the city council to do anything directly there. And I'll leave that there. I mean, the subject of indirect action is one, I'll leave for later in the conversation. The situation with Clover Flat is more complex, I think, in terms of authority and oversight than Upper Valley. But it's one in which I think we as a city have a more direct stake. So that's why in following up on our last meeting in which these things were discussed, that's why I engaged personally with aspects of the concerns about Clover Flat, because I think it is right for us to acknowledge and think very carefully about what the potential for pollution of the Napa River means for us. The Napa River flows right by our boundaries, and I don't know the extent of the water rights that involve diversions from Napa River, that pertain to properties in the city of St. Helena, but I know they exist. I don't know how many properties or how many points of diversion, but those water rights do exist. So I focused my personal time and effort into learning as much as I could in the time that I had available about what has been going on in recent years in terms of water quality sampling and analysis. It's occurring in a number of different ways. There's a series of monitoring wells that monitor groundwater quality on the site. And there's also a surface water sampling and analysis program that is in place. I've looked at lab results from both, not all of the lab results. My hat's off to anyone who can take that on. I certainly don't have that much time available, but because there's a lot of data, and there is a lot of data out there if one wants to examine it exhaustively. And I've learned something. I'm sure there's more to learn about the characteristics of leachate. I've looked at lab results that reflect those characteristics that are related to sampling after the leachate leaks or other leachate events. The leachate has a very low pH. It's, in other words, pretty dramatically acidic. It also has rather high iron and other metal components. That seems, so far as I can tell, to reflect both the geology of the site. Those same metals are found in uncontaminated groundwater simply from contact with bedrock. They're not uncommon in other parts of Napa Valley to have some elevated levels like that. But the effect of having a lower pH and more acid then means often you're getting more of these things leached out in contact with bedrock. Not sure if that's exactly what's going on with the leachate or not. But one of the things that I did learn is that, at least in terms of publicly available records, there's been no sampling of the Napa River. So while I can see why someone might assume that because leachate contaminated water has been sampled and analyzed in the creek that drains Clover Flat in the direction of the Napa River, that the Napa River itself has been polluted or contaminated. I can find no record to support that conclusion, because I can't find any requirement for sampling in the Napa River or any evidence that any of the public agencies involved have. Based on what I have seen, I think the implication is that the closer one gets to the river and the farther away from the site, the more dilute the influence is, and the less likelihood that one would even be able to distinguish the effect of whatever leachate entered the river from components entering the river elsewhere. That's an inference. It's one that is influenced in part by my conversations with Regional Water Quality Control Board staff. I don't know that that's the end of the story, because for all I know, someone at some point will do work in the Napa River that will point to a different conclusion. But at this point, and the more recent samples, and I'll back up a second. One of the challenges in looking at the past year at the sampling and analysis is the drought. When there's no rain, then there's no water in the creek. When there's no water in the creek, you can't take any samples. That's a kind of good news, bad news thing. You don't have data. That might be bad news. The good news is that means that nothing is moving into the river from that creek, if that were the concern. But in the first part of this year, there was enough rain to generate water, and there were samples, and the most recent report includes laboratory analysis. And there are some elevated components in those samples, again, that seem to correlate to the bedrock conditions and influence of the bedrocks on the water. There's some turbidity that shows up, but that often happens with rain events. I'm not sure that that's any cause for alarm. But there was no indication of any leachate contamination in those samples. So the reports to the effect that the leaks have been fixed, at least seem to me to be confirmed by the most recent samples. So I take rather strong exception to a characterization of these circumstances as indicating that the Napa River has been poisoned, or that our vineyards and wine are in some imminent threat of harm. I just don't see a factual basis for that. That is not to say that the canyon at Clover Flat is an ideal place for a landfill. It's certainly not. And its location, I think, Mayor Ellsworth, you've correctly suggested, is a reflection of a different time and a different set of practices and a different set of concerns. When I came to the Napa Valley in the 1970s, there were still any number of illegal private landfills around the county because the old ways really hadn't changed. But we do look at things very differently now. And so it seems to me personally that the take-home message is that we do have a really good reason to continue paying close attention to how things evolve. But I'm not seeing, as I say, on the water pollution side, I'm not seeing any basis for a large cry of alarm. And then when I look at my notes on the comments that we've heard tonight, I see Sandy Thompson commented that we shouldn't amend agreements with Upper Valley Disposal and Clover Flat. Kemi Smith, that there should be no amendment to the franchise agreement. Chris Malin said something about revenues that sustain the business. There were comments from CO that related to contracts with Clover Flat. And all of those do seem to me to reflect some ongoing confusion about what's in front of us. The amendment to the Joint Powers Authority Agreement doesn't touch the franchise agreements, which are in effect the contracts with Clover Flat and Upper Valley Disposal. No, nor so far as I can tell, does it have any effect on the revenues that go to Clover Flat and Upper Valley Disposal, unless one is thinking that the new recycling legislation that to some extent is referenced and related to this change in the JPA agreement means that there's more revenue going to Clover Flat or to Upper Valley Disposal. And again, I don't think the Joint Powers Agreement has any effect there other than it relieves the individual communities, the individual members of the Joint Powers Authority of the burden of having to comply with these new state requirements on a jurisdiction by jurisdiction basis. And I don't see any benefit to the city of St. Helena in taking on that responsibility. So there's also been, a repeated call for an RFP for competitive bidding. And, the implication was that we got to, or maybe
Hardy, I'm going to have to interrupt because we're going to have to extend the meeting. I'll need a unanimous.
Well, I'll move that we extend it then. I'll help.
I'll second.
And a roll call, please.
Councilor Hardy,
Yes.
Shuto,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Doring,
Yes.
Mayor Ellsworth.
Yes.
Thank you. And I'll try to wrap this up. I know I've been going on a long time, but this is very important, and it's important for all of us. The opportunity for an RFP comes at the end of the franchise agreement, and there's no, well, to put it very simply, I don't see any way to get there any sooner that doesn't involve litigation one way or another at tremendous risk to the city if the city is so involved. That's not what anyone really wants to hear who has the concerns that we've heard tonight, but sometimes we just have to square up with the ugly realities we face. And I am very much concerned that we do concerned citizens a disservice when we support or even promote wishful thinking. This is a hard situation, but I think we all have to be very conscious and as attentive as we can to what the options really are. So, given how the city of St. Helena really lacks any regulatory authority at all in this regard, I'm interpreting your calls, Mayor Ellsworth, as a call in effect to recognize some form of moral authority with respect to these concerns. And in that light, it makes a lot more sense to me since I don't see legal authority that would enable us to do any of the kinds of things that have been suggested tonight. And, you know, I'm going to interpret that, again, largely through what I see as being our real responsibility here, which is to safeguard the interests of the city of St. Helena. And so, again, I'm much more concerned about Clover Flat and the potential for water pollution than I am about operations on Whitehall Lane, where I know the neighbors are clearly, vocally miserable, but they're in a location where we simply can't solve the problem. Not that we can solve the problem if we perceive a problem at Clover Flat on our own, but to the extent that Clover Flat has the potential to affect the city and our constituents here in the city limits, I think we have to be prepared to address those concerns. So that's all I have to say for now, and I'll yield the floor.
Thank you. I see Councilmember Chateau.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Ellsworth. I was going to say something just in a very shorter sentence, that I think tonight what's in front of us, and that I would move forward on doing the Fifth Amendment to the Napa County Agreement, because that's what we need to do for the California requirements for our city to comply with SB 1383, which is the most significant waste reduction mandate to be adopted in California in the last 30 years. And these regulations are taking effect in 2022. That's just right here. And it's a really big deal for our city. And I believe that we need to work with others to be able to address it. And by passing this tonight, that's how we can do it. I hear all of the complaints and the frustrations from the Whitehall Lane residents, and I feel terrible about it. I feel terrible about the quality of life. And when I've checked and followed up on the people who, there is the complaint process, and there are the other people that regulate it that are outside of the county, like Peter X with the local enforcement agency, whose responsibility is to has a system of tracking the complaints and following up on it. I know that they have not still been addressed in the way that they would like them to be. And I know that this is going to be an ongoing issue, so we will have to follow that through the system that's appropriate to do that, and the mechanism that we have a way to do that as the city. But for tonight, I do think that we should move forward on this Fifth Amendment for the Napa County Agreement. I think it's what we need to do now to address complying with SB 1383.
Is there any additional comment? Councilmember Doring, any comment at this point?
You know, I think, to be frank, Councilmember Hardy has really laid out the issues that I see, especially the ones with respect to our authority, our regulatory authority, and our contractual authority, and really the sort of the pragmatic, logical next steps here. And I am in complete agreement with his analysis. I would remain open to the notion of the city doing some advocacy around a potential audit, irrespective of this issue. That's an issue for another day, and have that agendized and see really what that means and how we would work forward on that. It would be interesting. I mean, I know that, as I understand it, we still have another at least 15 years on the franchise agreement, and that even if we tried to breach it or terminate it, we would be the ones inheriting that issue, that contract with Clover Flat UVDS. So we would still be in that situation. I think we need to keep our options open there. I think we're legally and contractually constrained, and constrained by the lack of authority that Napa County and the state and other organizations have. But I think we can play an advocacy role to push on some of these issues that have come to light, especially with respect to the composting and other issues, and get more data and continue to be involved in that process through the JPA. So it's not a binary, hey, we just close the door, we're done. I think we still need to advocate for these things. I think we have some limitations. So I'm open to some of these things, open to looking at other options. Obviously, that's not a short-term solution. That's a completely long-term solution. But you got to start somewhere, to see what the options are. And I think, as I see it now, I think the options are limited, frankly, but I don't know enough about it. And I know that you've sought, other information from other operators, open to listening to that conversation. But I think this issue is a separate issue, frankly. I think it would be, I agree that we do not want to promote wishful thinking, and that moving forward with this amendment does not preclude us from looking at some of these other issues. And I'm happy to do that. I just think our options are extremely restrained, Mayor. But I hear what you're saying about some of these things. Obviously, we have to protect our water source. Obviously, we have to do what we can to advocate for those around us, even though it's in our jurisdiction. What's in our jurisdiction, what's outside our jurisdiction, we have to be cognizant of that. Folks are close enough where we have to be concerned about all in our community in the broader sense. I just see this as a separate issue, Mayor. This Fifth Amendment really is the only option. I don't see another option other than the Fifth Amendment here with respect to dealing with 1383. I don't even think we have the capacity in our own organization to take on that daunting role. We don't have the capacity right now to take on the issues that we're supposed to be taking on. I mean, we are loaded down. And so that doesn't stop us from having the conversation, but I think we need to be circumspect about it, careful, and do what we can do and not just give up necessarily. So that's kind of what I'm thinking. I hear what you're saying, but I also think there's a reality check here that we have to commit to. So that's kind of, those are my comments. Probably a little too wishy-washy for most, but that's how I see it. It's all gray to me as a lawyer, except for our contractual and regulatory authority. I mean, I think that's pretty clear.
Thank you. I'm seeing Mr. Lederer, Mr. Hardy, if Councilmember Hardy, if I may go to, I don't know if Mr. Lederer had a point on that.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Ellsworth. Since you made me stay, I figured I'd get my last word. And I just wanted to make a comment on the bidding process, which I realize is not on the agenda, but we seem to be going there anyway. So, and I'm not trying to say the UVA board made the right decision or the wrong decision. Ultimately, they're a board, they make their decisions. But in 1995, and then again in 2007, and then again in 2018 and 2019, the UVA board looked at the option between going out for competitive bid or negotiating a contract with the company at hand. And in each case, now I wasn't around in 1995, so I'm not going to address that. But in 2007, there was a negotiation around extending the contract and what the board could get for that. I don't remember all the details, but as I remember, the biggest piece of it was that at that point, the community was very interested in having a construction and demolition debris recycling facility, which didn't exist up Valley. And essentially, the company ended up paying for that in return for the extension. And there were other things. But the board made a conscious decision that what they could get out of a negotiated agreement was more than they could get out of going out for RFP. In 2018 and 2019, this discussion was around a number of different things, which resulted in the restated agreements. But to somehow say, and I think somebody said that this was somehow done in secret or whatever, the UVA board doesn't have closed sessions. Everything is done in open sessions. There had to be a dozen meetings on the contract. So again, you can agree or disagree with the decision they ultimately made, but I do, for the record, just have to say all of it was done in very open public, and particularly the last set of agreements was negotiated very much by the St. Helena representative on the board at that time. So I just have to say that these decisions were not made in private. There was a very public process that the board undertook, and ultimately they made their decision as to what they did. So that's all I had.
Thank you for the input. Councilmember Hardy?
Yeah, a few hopefully final comments for me. Another way of sorting out what I've heard tonight for me is to think of it as pointing to two systemic failures. One, a systemic failure in terms of management of operations, and it seems really most especially at Clover Flat. I would say the principal problem operationally with Upper Valley Disposal and Whitehall Lane really is its location. But that's, just my impression listening to all that I've heard. And then the second concept is that, in effect, that there's been a systemic failure by the JPA or by the county or both in terms of how the essential decisions have been made with respect to the franchise agreements in particular, and perhaps with respect to a use permit and use permit regulated operations at Whitehall Lane. I don't really have anything to add to the discussion about management of Upper Valley or Clover Flat. But I do want to say that if we have concerns, if anyone has concerns about, but maybe in some ways, most especially for us as a city council, when we have concerns about how other agencies with which we're involved are conducting their business. And again, I think this is probably true in all settings, but I'm going to focus on this one. It matters a great deal how we go about the enterprise of formulating our concerns and bringing them to the attention of our partners, I would say, in the enterprise. It rarely goes well when one leads the dialogue into a place where it becomes adversarial. Adversarial approaches are great tools for rallying the troops and generating a lot of comment and creating a feeling of solidarity, but they're really generally detrimental to good governance because there is almost invariably a polarizing effect. And so I'm saying all of this because I want everyone to understand, my colleagues on the council here and everyone who's listening, as a member of the public, I take all of it seriously. I see my principal role as a council member as to, being one of identifying problems and working on solutions. It's why I'm here. But I'm interested in effective solutions, and I'm really not interested in following a path that becomes obstructive or worse. So, I'm Mayor Ellsworth. I'll be happy to sit down with you in the months to come and talk about how we might find a more effective way of addressing some of these concerns. But I think that's all I can say about that for now. And I'm ready for, I can't even remember if Councilmember Chateau made a motion. She sounded like she was ready, but I'm ready to hear one.
So I will entertain a motion. I just want to make one last comment. I tried in every way to bring these concerns forward in a very rational way, and was not able to. My concern is the combination of risks: fire, water. The river was closed in 2019. Earthquake risk. We just had an earthquake. There's a complex series of piping that handles that methane, that very flammable gas up at in that high fire tier area. We're adding to the fuel load. I think it's the combination of risks. And as we saw at the March 15th meeting, I still believe there's a lack of comprehensive oversight. Many agencies looking at one aspect, but not seeing the whole, nor recognizing the potential risk from both sites. And fire is a big part of it, because that waste becomes fuel, and you get combustion events, also known as fire, at both sites. Landfills all are scientifically proven to leak, all are scientifically proven to be prone to fire. Just want that to be in people's consideration as we move forward. So with that, I will entertain a motion, and we can move forward here. I'm seeing Councilmember Chateau, and I am concerned that this company cannot manage a 1383. If our city can't, I'm also concerned that this particular company can't. So with that, I will entertain a motion.
I move approval of resolution authorizing the Fifth Amendment to the Napa County Agreement number 3265.
I will second that.
And a roll call?
Councilor Chateau?
Yes.
Can we have just a
Councilor Hardy.
brief discussion?
Oh, sorry, Mr. Doring.
Mr. Lederer, one of the things you can take back, or actually Councilmember Chateau, is it would be a benefit to the city to actually get the report. That is that it's not required, but it's a part of the JPA that they issue an annual report on the various issues. And we may, over time suggest some minor amendments to the JPA that are unrelated to this. I want to keep those options open, because I think we can improve the communication on an annual basis and on a more frequent basis. That's up to us as a city, but there's also I think there's some room in the JPA agreement to work on that. So I just want to keep that option open for the future, not here. Thank you.
So Cindy, I don't know where we are. And
Councilmember Hardy,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Doring,
Yes.
Mayor Ellsworth.
no. Okay, I'm seeing Mr. Prestwich.
I just want to be sure that we recorded the second. Was there a second on that motion, Madam City Clerk?
No. That was Councilmember Hardy.
And then as we go forward, I'd like to think about how we do agendize, talking more in depth on some of these other issues. So very good. We'll now move then. Thank you, everybody, for your focus on this. We'll now move to the item 12 point. Oh, I'm sorry.
Mr. Mayor, I need to let Mr. Councilmember Hall to please join us.
Oh, okay.
Just real quick.
Mr. Mayor, we have a hard stop at 10 o'clock, correct?
Yeah, so I'll try to move through these very quickly.
We may, okay.
What is your thought, Vice Mayor?
Well, we can continue to move through them. I'm not sure we're going to be able to finish, but I think we can. We can do our best.
I'm seeing Councilmember Chateau.
Yes, Mayor Ellsworth, could I make a recommendation or a request then that we go over 12.4 first about the climate action item, because that has,
Yes.
yeah.
Absolutely. We'll do that, and then we'll go back to 12.3.
Thank you.
And are we seeing Councilmember Hall on? Here he comes.
Councilmember Hall is in the works of getting on.
Okay, looks like he's right. Okay, we're gonna jump to 12.4, then go back to 12.3. We're gonna try to get done here by 10. So this is 12.4, consideration and proposed approval of a resolution authorizing the mayor to execute a cooperative joint powers agreement with Napa County, the cities of Calistoga, Napa, American Canyon, and the town of Yountville, and 2, commit to fund the city's proportionate share of $5,022 for the administration of the Napa Countywide Climate Action Committee. And this is Ms. Nixon, our assistant to the city manager.
Yes, thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'm going to try and be very brief with this. We have provided a detailed staff report that goes over the scope of what this proposed JPA would do, and also talks a little bit about the funding structure. So I would refer everyone to the staff report. Just as some very brief background, Mayor Ellsworth and Councilmember Shuto serve on the Regional Climate Action Committee. And this committee has met for over a year and has recommended the creation of a more formal structure to address organizational and operational issues to assist the committee in accomplishing its core goals and objectives, as I referenced in the staff report regarding climate change. So that is my brief presentation, and I will take any questions.
Thank you. Did I see Councilmember Chateau with a hand up? No, you took your, okay. Any council comment before I open it for public comment? Seeing none, I will open the public comment, and I'll check with our city clerk and see if there's any public comment.
I do not see any public comment, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, I'll close public comment, bring it back. I am very supportive of this, and thank everybody for focusing on it and the work that's been done by the Climate Action Committee, and thank Councilmember for her work in bringing this to this point. So, is there any other council comment or question? And if not, I will entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor, why are you supportive of it?
I'm supportive of it because I believe that we need to work cross-jurisdictionally. We can't be in a silo looking at the climate issues because they do not see our jurisdiction. So this is a dialogue that I believe is important here. It's important throughout the county and regionally as well, that we need to be linked in so that we're all following the best practices to try to get to this drawdown by 2030.
One question for you and Councilmember Chateau. Was there any consideration of bringing on the private sector, to get the buy-in of the major industries that contribute to greenhouse gas emissions? What is the vehicle for that? I guess my concern, I'm in favor of this also, Mayor, by the way. My concern is it is sort of, it's still up to the jurisdictions to pass their laws and regulate these issues, in their jurisdictions. What's the thought in terms of bringing in the responsible parties, I should say, and that's all of us, frankly, but the industries?
I'll let Anna speak to that. I'll just make a brief comment. One thing I do like about this approach is that we have elected officials and a city staff member on the committee, and so I think we can bring back action items and policies that are somewhat unified. I recognize what you're saying, and that's something I've been saying in these meetings as well, is we've got to get the large players engaged, and hopefully this committee is going to find the way to do that, and has been bringing in industry folks to talk, but we need more quicker. So Councilmember Chateau, if you have any.
Yes, that is a part of this committee, and we did have the industry players showed up for the first meeting. There was so much public comment. I remember everybody saying that they wanted to be involved. Please let us know. And so now we're inviting them back as we get along, but it's actually been 2 years coming to this point to put together this agreement to get the staff to be able to move forward on these bigger and bolder ideas. We also have heard from the community that there's grants out there. We know there's even more grant money that will be coming. And so we need to be organized and have this agreement in place so that we can apply for that money to be partnering with the community. And we know that we can't do it alone. It can't just be government. It's going to be in partnership.
And I believe that the sort of the unification of the jurisdictions is going to give us a stronger voice in bringing in the industry, et cetera, that it'll be a stronger voice saying we all have to work towards this together.
I'm not sure if we had public comment, but I'll move approval of the staff recommendation.
Let me open the public comment to make sure. I believe we did, but I'll just open the public comment.
There's no public comment.
No public. Okay, we'll bring it back and I'll entertain a motion.
I heard Vice Mayor Doring made a motion and I will second it.
And a roll call, please.
Vice Mayor Doring,
Yes.
Councilor Chateau,
Yes.
Hardy,
Yes.
Hall,
Yes.
Mayor Ellsworth.
Yes. Okay, and now we will move to our final item, which is item 12.3. And this is discussion and direction regarding the 2021 July 4th fireworks show. And this would be Andre Peachley, if he is with us.
I'm here, Mr. Mayor, and thank you. The title in the staff report says it all. And in the interest of time, I'll turn it back to you.
Okay, very good. We'll bring it back to the council and see any question or comment. Always, this is a tough call, but I'm looking at our year and our water supply. And my feeling is that having the fireworks, as much as they mean to the community, that the risk this year may not be, the risk may be too much to consider this. That's just my initial thought. Any comment from council? Thought from council?
Quick comment. I would concur with that, Mayor. I think much of our community is still suffering from PTSD from the last 2 or 3 years of fires. The last thing we need, especially without water, is another fire right now.
Thank you. Any other council comment before I open it to public comment? Seeing none, I'll go to public comment and see if we have public comment. And City Clerk, are we seeing any?
I see no public comment.
I'll bring it back to council. Is there any other council comment? I'm seeing none, and it looks like we are providing direction. We're not doing making any motion here. So do we have consensus from the council that this year we will not be having fireworks?
I'm in agreement.
We're in agreement. Okay, very good.
Agreement.
So, Mr. City Manager, you have your direction on that? Very good. Thank you. So it looks like we came in just under the time. Want to thank everybody for the comments, the focus, and the continued good work. So we'll go out there, we'll conserve water, we'll get into our recovery mode from the pandemic and move forward with optimism and good community spirit. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Good night.